Hello, everybody. How's everyone? This is okay. And here, let's just bring this here. Bring this here. And here we go. And everything looks okay. Hey, everyone. Welcome aboard to this special Sunday edition of the live show. We are going to tune the bands and digital decodes and picking up pirate stations. It's not very strong over here, but it's there. There's Texas Radio Shortwave on 5150 upper sideband. So we are, of course, checking out. So there's music right now, so I can hear it clearly. So Texas Radio Shortwave Pirate 5150 upper sideband. We'll keep an eye on any pirates that pop up during the show and slowly check out different little things, including some digital decoding of signals. And I'll probably have some questions. Maybe some of you know some stuff that I don't. So welcome to the Sunday edition. This is a show. The Sunday edition is, happens when it happens. It can be here, it can be there, it can not happen. It depends on the Sunday, depends on what I feel like doing on my Sunday. And of course, this is the shortwave show that we have on the weekdays. So we have 2 shows a week on Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. That's 0 UTC, which is UT Thursday, technically. And we have the Friday show that is at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific, and that's 20 hours Universal Time. And today, earlier than usual, because normally I do the Sunday show when there's one much later. But a lot of you guys wanted me to be a little earlier, so I thought, why not do one at 20 UTC? I thought it starting at 19. But the thing is, because of the longer and longer days that are happening, what's happening is that 4 p.m., 20 UTC, it's starting to get it's kind of a rough time for shortwave. And, as we get into the long days of summer, 20 UTC is that time when there's not as many signals as a little later in the day. So I thought, well, yeah, let's start at 20. I think it's going to be okay. And give me some time. I baked a homemade bread. That is a big problem because homemade bread means I eat half of it as it's still warm with butter, but that's another story. Nice to have everybody here, and of course, we'll be checking out and tuning the bands a little bit. So, like I said, there's our first pirate already, 5150 kilohertz upper sideband, and it's Texas Radio Shortwave that is on the air. It's not super strong, like I said here, but it's strong enough for the music, and it's nice to listen to pirate stations. Makes it for another type of listening, actually. Hope you guys that did listen to it enjoyed this morning's today's International Radio Report show that aired on CKUT, and I was listening to it, of course. Being home now, when it plays, I listen to it, and I know Sheldon listens to it, and we kind of comment on things that we hear and see, and a lot of people seem to be enjoying the fact that we're continuing to show like this. and it's working pretty well actually. We're getting I'm getting the hang of it first of all for recording all of the the show, editing the show, and so on. And we're kind of getting the hang of it of doing it. There's some little problem of the Skype. There's a slight Skype delay, so we kind of sometimes talk over each other because we don't immediately realize that somebody's talking at the other end. Or, but overall, I'm satisfied with the way it's going. Actually, it's not too bad at all. And so the International Radio Report is a show about radio. It's a 30-minute show about news and events that happens or will happen with radio-related stories. And it's on CKUT 90.3 FM here in Montreal. You can stream it at ckut.ca on Sunday at 14:30 UTC, 10:30 a.m. Eastern. And if you missed the show, well, the archive usually is there the next day. So starting on Monday, you can listen to the archived show. And the archives have 3 months of show. So 3 months of shows. And it's nice if you like to learn more about what's happening with radio. And I mean, it's radio everywhere. It's radio. There's some local stories sometimes with radio, what's happening in radio in Montreal or in Canada. But we also, it's called the International Radio Report. We have reports and information about things coming everywhere, so around the world. So it's really a lot of interesting stories there. And so why not take a listen or go to the archive and listen? And if you enjoyed the show, by the way, you can actually join in the International Radio Report Facebook group. That is the fans of the show. What's nice about that group is also that there are stories we won't talk about. Sometimes some stories are too lengthy to put in a 30-minute show. Sometimes we'll have links to some of the things we talk about during the show. So that is, of course, always posted on the International Radio Report Facebook group. And so if you do enjoy the International Radio Report, please join the group. And, well, of course, we have there's a fantastic publication called the Canadian International DX Club Messenger. So the Canadian International DX Club, or CIDX, is a radio club here in Canada. It's not just for people in Canada. It has articles every month on all sorts of things around the world. There's articles for newcomers. There's articles for things to listen to. I am the editor of the utility column. And so lots of information about radio. And I know that a lot of you out there are that have subscribed are extremely happy with the content. It's a very professionally made publication, and it's very interesting if you want to learn more about radio. And you can ask for a sample copy, cidxclub@yahoo.com, cidxclub@yahoo.com. Don't ask for a second one. It's only one sample copy per person. And of course, if you like what is in there, it's really inexpensive. $10 for 1 year, $25 for 3 years subscription. So, and a lot of people are using that 3-year subscription option because, you don't have to think about it for 3 years. And it's lots of really, really cool stuff in there. So why not take a look? We have, in addition to the live show that we do here, something that is the Facebook group. So, here there's a beautiful chat room, wonderful people. I mean, I think we can take example of this group as being one of the most civilized and most respectful group of people that are dealing with a radio subject. And that's what is the focus here. No, unnecessary thing or stories about politics or religion or anything. It doesn't have its place here. There are groups out there for that. So, if you're a fan of politics, there's tons of groups for that on the internet. Here, it's radio. And we concentrate on radio. And we are kind of a big bunch of people having fun with radio, which is cool because, you know what? This is fun for another reason with what's happening in social distancing. So, already our hobby, we say it often, is solitary in nature. And I mean, I got so many emails over the years that I've been doing live shows of people thanking me for what I do because they did feel alone in doing this hobby. And not everybody has a partner. Not everybody has, someone around them. There's a certain number of people out there that are live alone in their home and do radio. And even though radio is there to connect you to the world, it can sometimes feel like you're alone doing it. You can feel alone at home doing it. And it's cool because this is a place where we have everybody join, have fun, and feel part of a group. What's nice is that there's no pressure here. You can be part of the silent, and the majority of the people actually watching are part of the silent side of things. They watch, they enjoyed. I've got a lot of emails of people saying, you know what? I don't participate, but I enjoy reading the chat room while you're doing your show. So, they're not participating necessarily, but they are enjoying what they are actually seeing here. And it's, a lot of fun to see this. When I started doing this show, the live shows, I like I said, you have a certain way of thinking, of seeing things. You don't really realize what's going to come next. You just, you just jump in and do it. And then you realize that some people are there and become, big fans of what you do and continue watching you all the time. You have people out there that are, you kind of make friends, and it's kind of cool. It's like, wow. And, it's a side that you don't necessarily think of. There's that distance between us that for some reason makes you think that maybe it's always going to stay kind of, you are there and I'm here, until you start meeting some of those guys that watch the show and start interacting more with certain people. And then you realize, well, you know what? It's not just that. It's not you are there and I'm here. We're a bunch of people that are just having fun with what's happening. And I think that is really, really cool. I want to say hello, by the way, to Elizabeth that says hi. She says that she's happy to see there's a Sunday show today. And but she does remind me of something. She says, you do make a lot of videos and of live shows. Please, there is one thing I want you to know, is that take some time for yourself. So you don't have to do a Sunday show. It's fun when it's there, but think of yourself first, and the rest will come. So, and I get that regularly from people. So Elizabeth in Regina, Saskatchewan. So, that I do get that from time to time, saying, well, it's fun to have the Sunday show, but you know what, take care of yourself first, because you do a lot of work, and we rather have one or two shows that are there always than have too many shows, and then you get a burnout of some sort, or you get tired of doing the live shows. So yeah, don't worry. That's why there are some Sundays I'm taking the Sunday off. It's a little bit of thinking of myself. Like, usually what happens is, so on Friday, I got a few comments of people on Friday saying, well, the show was kind of short. Well, it was 2 hours. I mean, don't forget, guys, one thing. It's like 2 hours of talking all the time is a lot of talking, is something that is, you guys don't realize at one point that when you end a 3-hour show or a 2-hour show, you're kind of tired. You're mentally tired. You're not physically tired, but it's a lot. And what happens is sometimes there are days, you're not as, you're kind of not there all the time. So there are days you're like, yeah, you know what, gonna cut it short today, Like there are other days when everything goes and you're like, wow, okay, we did a 5-hour show. But this is, like I always say, there's no time limit. And so we go with the flow, and depending on the interaction with everybody. But it's a lot of work. But on Friday, when I ended the show after 2 hours, I already was thinking that there was a high probability that I would have a show today already. So also I was thinking about that. It's like, even though, it's shorter on Friday, there's going to be a show on Sunday. So there's going to be a compensation. But, it's what I do on Sunday right now is the fact that I wake up in the morning, I take my coffee, listen to the International Radio Report, and see how the day goes. And at some point, I decide what I do. Do I do a live show or not? Do I feel like I want to just, take it easy and have fun? I took out my little FRS today, my little GMRS actually, because of there's an article that's saying that a lot of walkie-talkies are actually sold because of COVID-19. Apparently, some kids are keeping contact with their friends via walkie-talkies. At first when I was reading the article, I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. But there's one thing that came to mind that I didn't that didn't come to mind immediately. Some of you have seen Stranger Things, the Netflix series. Kids in that series are actually using walkie-talkies to talk to each other. And that series is a very popular series. Stranger Things is one of the most popular shows on Netflix. And I'm sure that there's a lot of younger, kids that watch that show because there are kids in it. And I'm sure that there's a part of the kids that probably are thinking Stranger Things. Oh, this is so cool. We're going to do like Stranger Things. We're going to communicate with walkie-talkies. I'm sure part of the reason is that also. So, having that subject in that amateur radio and radio subject in Stranger Things mixed in with, the fact that now we're in a situation where you can't see your friends. Yeah, you know what? And actually, I was scanning the GMRS, and there was, it's not being, because to be fair, Stranger Things walkie-talkies, and I actually have a pair here that are exactly the ones in the Stranger Things series, are CB radios. So they are on the 40 channel CB, and of course, that's something that people don't know. It's not something that people realize. People, go and buy out these instead today, which are on the UHF range. And honestly, they are actually better than whatever walkie-talkie we had when we were young. Even the couple of watt CBs that I have, this kind of beats those pretty much. These are pretty surprising. And the people don't know that these are not on the same frequency range, and these are not, CBs. They might be thinking these could be CBs or like CB, but in reality, people don't know the behind the scenes of what's happening with these radios. So, and Stranger Things, they're using CB radio, walkie-talkies that are on the CB channels. One of the I would say one of the mistakes that I believe, and I would need to go back and watch the episode because I want to rewatch Stranger Things. Because, every time you watch a series, when you watch it again, you see things that you missed the first time around. But I do believe that one of the kids, when he's on his bike and has a wireless one, I think the wireless one he's using is a 49 megahertz one. Well, while the other ones that are shown are all CB 27 megahertz. I will need to go back. Of course, only a radio geek will see that, but I need to go back and see that because that would be kind of a blunder in what is a perfect reenactment of 80s style in that series. So that would be kind of a blunder. It's like, oh, somebody messed up here, didn't realize that thing is not the same frequency range. It's a very minor detail. It's only, like I said, only a geek like me will see that. Nobody will notice. I think it was Sheldon that told me when we were talking about Apollo 13 movie, In the Apollo 13 movie, they show the wife of one of the astronauts listening in on the astronauts' conversations. And there's a sticker, there's a little speaker with NASA on it. And I think it's Sheldon was telling me that those were realistic, kind of realistic speakers or something that were used, which technically are not what should have been shown for that time period. But obviously, all they wanted to do is to show that the wife is listening to the communications. But it's funny because we all have these little geek moments when we watch a movie and you're like, huh. Sometimes they show. I remember, I don't remember the movie, but I remember one movie where they were. So it's like in a. I'm pretty sure it's a science fiction movie, and there's kind of a scene there with the army communicating in the movie, and I remember that movie showing the guy with his, with the microphone. But then there's a scene where you see the radio and it's not a transceiver, it's actually a shortwave radio. And you're like, yeah, well, that doesn't transmit. It's just a radio to receive. They could at least have used a ham radio transceiver. But anyways, once again, details that only the geeks, the radio geeks that we are, will notice at some point in the movies, and it's just funny. I'm trying to figure out if it's not the I think it's a movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I think it's Predator. I'm not sure. It might be another movie, and I'm out of the boat there. But I anyways, I remember that you looked and it was like, oh, so that means that microphone isn't connected to anything. So, but that's geek stuff, and of course the general population isn't where we are, and of course I digressed in talking about how we have a wonderful group here, and there's a Facebook group that goes with it, the official SWL channel group. So why not join that if you haven't joined? So what is the purpose of the group? Well, the purpose of the group is that, like I said, we're a great gang of people here. We're having fun, but somehow there was something missing for a while. For a while, when the show ended, well, people that were happy to join and happy to be part of something were back at home alone. So, I resisted the fact of doing a group for a while because I was part of a lot of other shortwave groups, and I didn't want to compete with other groups that were existing on Facebook. And then slowly, I came out of a lot of groups because slowly one of the things that was apparent and that I just couldn't cope with is how a lot of the groups have, idiots that are just, almost belittle others and so on. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. You know what? And basically, when I started getting out of a lot of groups, and I'm out of almost every group now. First of all, also I'm out of those groups because I didn't find any. To be part of a group for me is be part of something that is of interest, that I'll learn something that is evolving into some interesting stuff. And I noticed a lot about, oh, well, I don't learn much. And what probably was the last straw for most groups was the fact that some people were coming up to me and saying, well, you post these videos of you received the radio, whatever, and well, you don't even share it on our groups. And when that happened, I was like, okay, well, I don't have to share it in your groups if I don't feel like it. I mean, and basically, that was the straw. That was like, okay, the hell with it. Okay, I'm getting out, and bye-bye. I don't need that. I don't need that type of, especially because what probably was something that made me mad about that comment was, I talked about your groups on my live shows so many times that you enjoyed more, participants. You had more people in your group because of me talking about your group all the time. So, at some point you're like, the hell with it. I don't need that. So I went out, and that's where, I had a lot of you saying, hey, I want to have I would like to have a Facebook group or a group of somewhere where we can continue chatting and continue having fun together. Because this is so much fun when we're having live shows, and that's where I decided to start that group. So it's been running since what, January roughly. We're at 745 members, if I'm not mistaken. A little or earlier, I saw that number 745. Pretty good. And it's growing fast, actually. It's growing really fast. And I'm pretty sure that before the end of the year, we're going to be past 1,000 members at the speed that it goes. And what's really nice of the group is that people are polite, people are having fun, and people are sharing what they're listening to, videos of radios and pictures of their radios in their shacks. And, it's just, hey, I'm having my coffee and this is what I'm listening to this morning. Hey guys, this is my shack. Oh, look at that. I got a new radio. Oh, look. And, I post what I'm listening to. I post stations that I hear and, kind of want to give everybody, a head start, saying, hey, I'm listening to this. Last night I had the best reception of Radio New Zealand in a long time. It was really amazing. And, I posted it on the group. And I got a couple of, feedback saying, hey, thanks, man. It's, I'm hearing it. And it's really cool to listen to Radio New Zealand. And man, he was coming in really well at 0330 to 04, at some point up to 0415, maybe. 13840 was coming in with S9 plus 20 peaks. It was really, really a good signal. And starting about 0415-ish, it started slowly dropping in signal. But man, I had not listened to Radio New Zealand in such a long, long time. By the way, there's a sunspot that actually appeared on the sun today. It's part of the old Cycle 24 groups, but still, it's a sunspot. Let's hope that it's going to have a little more propagation for us. Also, something interesting that I was reading. So there's a guy that specializes in listening to Jupiter on his radio, and he posts videos sometimes of it's kind of an SDR, and he posts videos and makes us listen to the ocean wave whooshing sounds of Jupiter from time to time. And he had a comment with his video today that said, I don't know if it has to do with COVID-19, but the bands are quieter than they usually are for me. And it probably does. If you live, especially if you live in a area where it's kind of industrial, I'm pretty sure that you guys probably see a drop in noise levels in some areas because of people not working, and a lot of businesses right now are off. So I'm sure that some of you will see a difference there. So enough babbling. I just talked for 30 minutes and didn't even say hi to anybody. So we're going to try to catch up as fast as we can. So 5150, once again, I believe it's still Texas Radio Shortwave Pirate. So is it that? Or here I have partial India radio. So I don't know if it's still there or not, but there's definitely something on 5150 upper sideband right now. I'm hearing with some music. Yeah, Texas Radio Shortwave. That's it. It says partial India radio / Texas Radio Shortwave. 5150 upper sideband. It's not very strong, but it's still there here. I can hear the music right now. Okay, talking about people. Brett Wayne, nice to have you on board, my friend, from Salamanca, New York, KC2NXP. Hey, I got that all in my head. Nice. Joe Sambra Newhouse, nice to have you here from Brazil. Kevin, nice to have you here. Kevin J. Apollo, WS2H. Rainy day on the Jersey Shore. Listen to station on 9330 at 17 UT, but could not fully identify. It's probably world's last chance. I almost said worst last chance, which I would give a name for that. Is worst last chance would be a better name for that broadcast. World's last chance broadcast through the WBCQ. And what's happening also, Kevin, is not just conditions. As we change season, conditions change and propagation changes. 9330 might be jumping over you more often than not now, with the changing of the longer days and all of that. Usually my best time for WBCQ is summer, because in the summer I usually am able to get 5130, 7490 from time to time. But here, Monticello, Maine isn't that far from Montreal, so a lot of the signal is actually jumping over Montreal. Mr. Lucky Train, nice to have you here. Frank, Ireland, nice to have you on board. Mr. Lucky Train is from a drizzly and cooler than what's normal for late April, Pennsylvania, which is pretty much what we're having here. We're having much cooler weather than usual, I gotta say. By the way, Kevin, Jane Apollo, I was, I have a hard time getting D-Star decoding on the ICOM ICR30 that you sent me. But I was happy. Yesterday morning, it was very beautiful. I went out with my coffee on the balcony and stumbled across a D-Star French network on VHF 2 meters. That one decoded quite well. It's really when I'm in the UHF range it seems bad. But you know what? To decode, I had to put the attenuator at 2. That means the ICOM is totally overloaded. It's crazy. Crazy. What else do we have? Is there a way to change your display name in chat? I would like to use my ham call sign instead. I believe there is. You must. I haven't checked it out, but believe I'm sure somebody out there has the answer for this. So I don't know. It's because I've seen people change their names, but most of the time when I saw the people change their names, it seemed to be related to the fact they had new accounts or different accounts. So I don't know. Jeff King, nice to have you here, my friend. Frank Ireland is from Tampa, Florida. Rufus Newt, QATH, is the Laurentian Valley, Ontario, Canada. Randy, Riverside, California. Nice to have you here, my friend. Don Warner, nice to have you here. Stephen Wood, nice to have you on board. Cape Cod, Pirates on 5150. Crittenden Tuttle 4, nice to have you here, my friend. Roberto Rojas, ¿cómo está, mi amigo desde Argentina? Nice to have you on board. My name is Gilles. I'm located in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. I always get at least one person throughout the show or in the comments that says, hey, where are you? I don't know where you are. David Williamson, nice to have you on board. Mr. Paul was here up to 10 minutes before the show started, and now he's, I think, outside. So he slept all afternoon in the chair here, but now he's gone. I think he's gone outside. Dijon, nice to have you here from Germany. Pretty cool to have you here. Says nice. There's a show today. Kay Davis, nice to have you here. VA3 BCB. Chuck, nice to have you here from Indiana. KD9DHT. Trond, nice to have you here from Norway. James Farley, nice to have you on board. Tony Westbrook, nice to have you here from Westbrook in the UK. Eyebrawler, nice to have you here from Arkansas. Matambali is listening to Voice of America, 17530. The big signal, that's via Greenfield, South Carolina. Stelian Durak, nice to have you here from Romania. Al Windley, nice to have you here from Australia. Katalin Alm, nice to have you here from Germany. Vince Perrault, salut. Et bienvenue, Vince, de Deux Montagnes. Not very far from Montreal, actually. Joe Rotman, nice to have you on board. Understand the Times, KC8KSK, nice to have you here, Tom, in South Carolina. Hey, Tech Guy, nice to have you here. Bobby Burgess, nice to have you on board, WA 5107 SWL in Morgan City, Louisiana. Bob, nice to have you here from rainy and cool Northeast Ohio. Northern Dawn, nice to have you here. Dave Spiegel, nice to have you here from Indiana, NE9F. Osakama, nice to have you on board. Says such a nice community. Absolutely. Absolutely. Summerflyer1, nice to have you here from England. James Farley, do you think today's portable radios could have dealt with the signal levels from the 80s? That's a good question. With today's portable receivers, it's sad we don't go travel in time, because I would like to see Texan PL 660, 680, or an XH Data D808, and see how it coped with all the signals from the 80s or 70s on shortwave. I'm sure we'd be surprised at how they have flaws. I wouldn't be surprised that one of the things that they might be doing today is just saying, well, we can lower the price of the radios by doing this and that, or we're leaving out that part because, anyways, there's not that many signals and it won't overload or anything, But that would be a very, very interesting thing to do. Higher end radios will probably deal with those signals fine without any problems. How would an SDR play device, work in environments with signals from the 70s or 80s? That'd be really, really interesting to see. I mean, first of all, anybody that would see something like this would be just amazed in 1985, 83, 82. I mean, when I started in 82, if this would have existed or in some way, it was like, wow, this is so cool. But I mean, man, that this is crazy what we have today. But it's a good question. I think a lot would cope well, but there were a lot of very strong signals, and stations were all jam-packed, one next to each other. That would be a very interesting experiment for sure. Mark Rich, nice to have you on board. It's a second live show of the week for me in sunny Europe, watching from West England. Cool. Frank Ireland ordered an MLA 30 Plus. I may need to use an SMA to F connector to 3.5 millimeter adapters since the antenna is all SMA. Do you think that I will notice any losses due to the mismatches? No, I don't think so. Not with an active antenna, and not at the frequencies that it operates, honestly. And the frequencies that it operates, those mismatch of 50, 75 for reception have very little effect. It's like people buying some really expensive, coax, like LMR 400. On shortwave, it doesn't matter. On shortwave, if you have that or you have RG58, you won't see a difference. The loss is extremely low below 30 megahertz. It's really when you get higher and higher in frequency that it really becomes noticeable. Where one of the rants that I get all the time from some hams out there that think they know it all is when they see me doing tests on the radios and they notice that I used alligator clips between radios. And the first comment is always like, well, you don't know what you're doing, and those alligator clips are, just creating problems, and basically, that is not a way of testing radios, and you must be inducing noise. And it's like, look, for the testing purpose that I do, it works fine, and it's all right, and it's a valid test. Okay, let's stop going overly crazy with the way we test stuff. I'm not stupid. I know somewhat what I'm doing. So when I use alligator clips, I do, test out different things a little bit to make sure that it's valid and that there's no loss in between each radio. And there's, I know it's not the perfect thing to do. It works, and that's the important part of it. And I understand what you mean. I understand what you're saying, but you're besides the point of this channel, which is let's keep it simple for people to understand, and that's it. Okay? There are some really technical YouTube channels out there. That's where you should be if you're concerned that using an alligator clip will give a 0.06% loss and whatever. And it's like, yeah, there are other channels for that. Okay? Here we're simple but effective. It works. It does the job. That's all. Everybody's saying hello to Elizabeth. So Frank, it's gonna work fine. Everybody's saying hello to Elizabeth. Esteban, nice to have you here from the Canary Islands. Jeff King says, one thing I like about the Facebook is that people ask a lot of questions. Some questions may seem simple or stupid, but only stupid question is one not asked. Yeah, absolutely. Once again, any questions is welcome, because you don't know, you don't know. I mean, I would have looked dumb using my realistic DX100 in 1982. I would have seen expert looking at me and probably laugh and saying, well, look at the guy doing that and doesn't understand this. And you know what? We start somewhere. We all start somewhere. We have a surprisingly high amount of people that are newbies here. And I mean, they have no idea what they have in their hands and what they're dealing with. They're following us and me and trying to understand what exactly are they doing, That's pretty simple. So there's no stupid questions, It's just a lack of knowledge. You don't know. And somebody out there does know is going to help you with it. In this group, the Facebook group, and here also, it's really amazing for that, because we are really helping each other, and I want to keep it that way. There's no place here for somebody that thinks he's better than everybody else. Rob, Phoenix, Arizona, nice to have you here. Brian Penny, nice to have you here from Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Like a shirt? I thought I'd put a shirt today. I had my YouTube hoodie, and I was like, I want to look nice on the camera today, so I put a shirt on. Northern Dawn says PMR radio here sold a lot of radios. Rufus Newt says kids figured out cell phones. Radio leaves no footprint. René Charbonnier, nice to have you here from the Netherlands. One of the aspects of the walkie-talkie craze of the kids in COVID-19 also was interesting. They were talking about the fact that a lot of families, when the kids want to do, video chat or stuff like that, it halts down their internet connection. So sometimes it interferes with what the parents might be doing on the internet and so on. Also, they were saying that a lot of places are still having those internet data caps. So what happens is that they can't communicate that much because they're hitting that data cap real fast. So by using talkies, now they can talk for as much as they want, which I think is a great idea. Esteban yesterday finished his first CW QRP DIY kit. It works, and next projects are the Morse key and the 40-meter antenna. Cool. Lots of people keying. It's amazing. I'm going to say one thing, because he says not sure the bandwidth, no control on it either. Yeah, it must be pretty CW usually is, very small bandwidth, very small footprint. I am always amazed at the amount of Morse code signals. It's interesting because we rant a lot on the handbands about digital modes. But have you guys noticed that there are more CW Morse code signals than there are people talking voice? And I am surprised at the amount of people in Morse code. And I think it's something that when someone understands and works CW, they're kind of happy to do it. I don't know. Osaka says, unfortunately, not all teenagers in my age are interested in radio. Well, one of the things for sure is that it's not everybody also. I mean, even when I was young, so I was lucky because I had 3 good friends as a teenager. And I mean, have friends at school and stuff, but real friends that you go and hang out with and so on. I had 3 really good friends. One was Benoit, one was Stéphane, and one was Jean-Pierre. And Jean-Pierre was the guy we were always together, always doing stuff. When there were days there was no school, we would be together doing stuff. We'd go to the park and play tennis and frisbee and play hockey in the winter. And he was into shortwave for a short time. When I got that DX100, you got a DX100 also, which makes it very unique because honestly, there's not a lot of teenagers that have a shortwave radio and that a friend of them will have a shortwave radio also. So, I don't think it's that different from that period of time because there was a lot of people, you were pretty much alone interested in radio when you were on radio. I don't know how many times I heard, oh, you're listening to that static again. But my other friend, Stefan, that lived at the corner of the street. So he was 2 years younger than me. So when I started shortwave, I was 13, he was 11. And at that time age, 11 and 13 is a big difference because you're not in the same place. He was still in primary school, and I was at 13 in high school. It's a different thing. You're kind of older, and that age difference is much more apparent. Today when you're 30 and 32 is like it's the same age. 51 or 50 and 49, the same age. But at 11 and 13, it is a big difference. And so I would play with him because he was on the same street. That's how we became friends, actually, because he lived in the street and he had walkie-talkies. Was a big fan of walkie-talkies, and I had my realistic walkie-talkies. So sometimes we would hit a little contact and talk. That's how we kind of started being friends. And as we went older, so he became, when he got it as a teenager in high school and so on, at some point, that age difference slowly, the gap and the differences are less and less there. And when I got into college in '86, he had dropped out of high school in that year, and he was still he had 2 years left of high school back then. And he got a job. And of course, when you start working, you kind of it makes you kind of older mentally when you get a job and stuff like that. Plus the fact I was in college, and we would share a lot of common interest. He loved electronics and a bright guy. I mean, when somebody tells me, high school dropouts, I can tell you some of the most intelligent people I've ever seen in life are high school dropouts, actually. I've seen so many stupid people with university degrees and so many brilliant people that didn't even, finish their high school. And he's part of one of those brilliant people. He was like, quick and understanding stuff. I learned electronics on my own a lot. He was kind of always a step ahead. He was always, oh yeah, but look at that, and that works like this. And I'm like, hey, you're right. How come I've been doing this for 2 years and I never understood that it worked like that, actually. He was that quick. He was like, oh yeah, that works like that. And he was always ahead. he was passionate about electronics and stuff, and I mean, he could repair stuff. You would, when he got his jobs and stuff, people were calling him. So it's like, oh, my TV's broken down. Can you check out if you can fix it? He fixes his own electronic stuff pretty much. I haven't talked to him in a while, but I'm pretty sure he does it still today. And I had a friend that was crazy of electronics, and he had a Commodore computer. We had both the Commodore 128 at some point. We were sharing games and stuff. So, that was the other thing. But anyways, like I was saying, there's not a lot of people interested necessarily in the same things that we are, even in any type of hobby. If you were a teenager fan of electronics, I don't think there was a lot of, I look at high school. So if you remove the real friends that you make when you're young and you have your school friends, which are people that you talk and have daily activities with because of school, but they're not the kind of people that you're going to go and have go out with or go to their house and play or whatever, because that's my school friend, and I gotten kind of no interest in really going to your home or whatever. And if I look at all the people around me, the school friends I had, shortwave was not something that people knew about. Electronics also was kind of that mysterious thing that, oh, you're the electronics and radio geek. But nobody knew really nothing much, So here again, I'm ranting again. Don't worry, guys. I'm 23 minutes behind in the chat. I'm going to try to go down as fast as I can. Tina Smith, my boyfriend did that in the 80s. And that was our cell phone and also CB radio. He had one on his 10-speed bike. Wow, that's geek. Bird Box used a CB handheld radio. Pretty crazy. What do we have? Frank Ireland says some of these scenes in Apollo 13 movie were shot in a clean room from Rockwell in Seal Beach, California. Used to work in that clean room. It is Boeing now. Oh, interesting. Mr. Lucky Train thinking of buying a radio with FM and SCA capabilities, which is subcarrier audio. Does anyone in the chat room know if there's a subcarrier audio broadcast in the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Delaware Valley region? That is a good question. I mean, look at Montreal here. There's a lot of FM broadcasters. There's only 3 that actually have subcarrier audio stations. Because I have that little subcarrier audio radio that I purchased. So there are 3 stations. The rest don't use subcarrier audio, which is sad because there's so much they could do with that. Crazy. David Williamson, no beer tonight. Tonight is vodka cranberry juice. So cheers, everybody. Ruta 130 Radio, nice to have you here. Mountain Valley, nice to have you here. Jerry DX, nice to have you on board. Mike McManus, nice to have you here. Notice you have an old Raider Shack Pro 2006. Yep. I need to put it out and put it up in working order, actually. It's been sitting there doing nothing. John McClure, nice to have you here. Sneaking shows without me. I'm trying, but you're always there. Nice to have you on board. Just kidding. Andy Coley, nice to have you on board. Jim, nice to have you here from Rhode Island. Jumbo City Media, nice to have you on board. Vianney Arsenault, bonjour et bienvenue de la région de la Gaspésie. Nice to have you on board from the eastern part of Quebec. VA2 VMA. Legion, spring, summer usually enables me to receive channel 292 every now and then. Cool. Stephen Wood Thunder, got to disconnect the antennas. Vianney, thank you, Vianney. Neto DiMaggio, nice to have you here from Italy. Yonkino's, nice to have you on board. If I do a scan on my Texan 380 and get X amount of stations, I then do an ETM scan and I always pick up more than the normal scan. Any idea why this is? You got to be careful with scanning of the 380 and scanning of the frequencies, because there's a threshold where it detects that the station is there. And shortwave stations aren't fixed in strength. They vary all the time. So what happens is that from scan to scan, you will have some stations that it detected in one scan that it's not going to detect 5 minutes later. It's a very difficult thing to really put a number on. Why is it not always the same number of stations that is received or not? And each type of different scan has a different threshold where it will actually be detecting something, because it can't be too sensitive, or else your ETM scan will be filled with channels that are just noise. And it can't, so because of that reason, well, there's a threshold where it might miss out on some of the weaker stations sometimes. Glenn Zekman, nice to have you here from Tennessee. Nato DiMaggio is from Salerno. Cool. JDX listening to Ham from New Mexico. W5RRJ on 14276. Cool. Richard Kroger, nice to have you here. Do you know Morse code? How did you learn it? Many people have time now. I'm not good at Morse code. If it's sent real slow, I will be able to kind of get what's going on. But my Morse code learning was through a lot of Morse code. A lot of that had to do with maritime stations in the past. When there are a lot of maritime stations, there's a lot of Morse code stuff. And that made me sometimes, go through and sit down and listen to the code to try to decode it. But I'm very slow at it because I haven't listened enough, so I'm not really good. And it's like a language. It's taking the time to do it regularly. If you listen and try to decode Morse code every day for half an hour or even 20 minutes, you're going to get better at it as time goes by. It's like learning another language. Ralph Bender, nice to have you here from Germany. W5BL, nice to have you on board, listening to a Texan R9700DX and 82 degrees in central Texas. Perfect weather for a radio outside. Levi Nathan, nice to have you here from Israel. Old TV program with a lot of radio stuff was Health. I never watched that show. Maybe I should watch it. Maybe I'm missing out on stuff. Jeff Williams, nice to have you here from Southwest Cornwall, UK. Alembic 65, nice to have you on board. And hello from the second Bob in Northeast Ohio. Grateful the hot weather is delayed as long as possible. Mike Thornton, nice to have you here from Derby, Kansas. Kid WC0L. Pretty cool. And everybody once again says hello to Elizabeth. Jim Farley, 28350, 10 meters USB hams on now. And there's the 1010 contest in digital modes. Try the lower part up to 2359 UT today. Let me just check if there's something here. A semblance of possible stations. 28100. Nope. Because there is what's called the group called the 1010 International group is having today until 2359 digital contest. So if 10 meters is open near where you are, that is the part to listen to. Tom DXer, nice to have you on board from the lower Hudson Valley, New York. And yes, I did snuck in on Sunday. I sneaked in. Jumbo City Media, feel like that too. I don't know what I'm doing most of the time. Love your Facebook group. Thank you very much. Jane Paradis, nice to have you here. Got new ICOM R8600. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Mark Rich, questions help. And as I always tell others, nothing is a waste of time. One always learns from the experience. Absolutely. Timo 93, nice to have you on board from Kent Island, Maryland. Mike Thornton says, I got into ham and shortwave radio 54 years ago. When I was 12, I am not an expert, and I learn something new about this hobby every day. Nobody should feel inferior because they have questions. Absolutely. Ari, nice to have you here from Illinois. KD9FCZ. Jared Genter, nice to have you here. Took my Texan PL 880 to Bear River Migratory Bird Refuge here in northern Utah a couple of days ago. A lot of good reception between 11 and 14,000. I've never heard before. As soon as you go out of the city, it's immediately you notice that what is the biggest problem of our hobby is the noise that we are in. In big cities, it's crazy. And even in smaller cities, there's a lot of noise around us. Kevin Jane Apollo, Voice of America 9800 in Korean. Cool. What else do we have? Let me go down. Yin Lin. Question from Montreal. How did you ground your ICOM 8500? The manual mentions not to ground it electrically. The grounding that I have, well, right now it's not plugged in, but the only grounding that I have is when I use the sloper, which is grounded with the shielding of the coax is grounded on the metal shed in the backyard. That goes way down to the ground. It's not the best way to do it, but it's the possibility I've got here because I am on the third floor. It's kind of a long way down to earth. So it's kind of difficult for me to have a good ground, actually. But that's when I'm using that, because when it's just used with the MLA30 loop, it's not grounded technically. It's just, it uses the electrical way of the loop, the way it works. Because the only grounding that the radio has is really when it's on the sloper, because of the outer the braided shield that is connected to the metal shed. Jared Genter says, true, have long wire running outside a window about 40 feet, but have a hard time getting rid of RFI. Unfortunately, long wires, Jared, are picking up a lot of noise, unfortunately. So nope, no copper in the ground or anything. It's really just basic basic grounding on the metal shed. Plozes, nice to have you here from Colombia. Mika Delmage, nice to have you here from Sherwood Park, Alberta. Trustin P, nice to have you here. Been a while since I've been in live chat. Good to be back. Good to see you back. Yeah, that could help. If you don't have a lot of distance with the ground, of course you can put a copper rod in the ground or any metal rod or in the ground. But not every ground is good for a good grounding. It depends on the composition and how much humidity is in the ground and so on. Calvin, nice to have you on board. Says thanks for the bonus show. Happy to be here. VNA, just have red wine. I'm jealous. No, this is This is vodka and cranberry juice. Sinan Awad, nice to have you here, my friend from Bulgaria. And everybody's pretty much keeping safe. Nice to have you here. I miss Radio Bulgaria. I miss Radio Bulgaria so much. J-Bound 1, nice to have you here. Just finished his next antenna to a quarter wave for 49 meters. Cool. That must work pretty good for international broadcast down there. Really nice. Really nice. And been building all sorts of loop antennas. That's the fun part. I remember having a lot of fun designing and trying all sorts of different things with antennas when I was a teen. I would, in the summertime, I would go out. I don't know how many. So I've got an electronics store not very far from here, which is called Addison Electronic. And they sell, of course, all sorts of surplus electronic stuff. And of course, one of the things I purchased there, probably the most, I probably purchased thousands and thousands of feet of wire from that place. It was so cheap. And I would, I would try all sorts of antennas and all sorts of things. It was just crazy. Artist Ali Crafter's Kitchen. Nice to have you here from Massachusetts. Replacement Renegade 100 arrives tomorrow. Woohoo! That's going to be fun. Going to be a happy guy. Crittenden Total 4. Does anyone know of any stations that specifically broadcast pictures? Well, it depends what you mean by pictures. If you're talking about weather charts and maps and stuff, because they're technically pictures, weather fact stations do. But if you talk about specifically broadcast just pictures of all sorts of things, well, there's no real station that broadcasts only that. Kevin Wood, nice to have you here from Nova Scotia, Canada. What else do we have? Make Darius, nice to have you on board. And Paul is somewhere outside, I think. No problem, Inlin. Mark Simijan, nice to have you here from Croatia. Pretty cool. Brent Erickson, what's the future of shortwave? I watched Radio Russia go in Australia. There's still a big future for shortwave because there's a lot of broadcasts to different areas. The stations that leave are of a specific kind. A lot of them are the governmentally owned stations that are there for a specific audience, and then they find that maybe there's no more, or there's no need for any a international broadcast of some sort from their own countries. And then there's the big gun broadcasters that have more of a the idea of their broadcasts, or their what they want to do is be the official broadcaster of the world, and that's where some stations fall in that category, like BBC, Voice of America, for example. They China Radio International wants to be like that also. They want to broadcast to the world, and some of specific audiences, VOA, BBC, are to give information in countries and areas where it's difficult. Those types of broadcasts, anything that is a broadcast meant to help people around the world that are having a hard time getting real news, or news that isn't biased in too many ways, because bias news is a complex issue, because some people, and I'm sure somebody would come up to me and say, well, the BBC is biased, and yeah, okay, but we gotta put that in a specific way of thinking, that it's I'd rather have my news from Voice of America than China Radio, let's say. Okay, personal thing, but I think some of you understand the reasoning here, even though I mean, Voice of America is the U.S. point of view of things around the world. Of course, it's biased in some way, like Channel Radio is biased, and the BBC. I tend to think the BBC is more open and more independent, even though it's still the UK's broadcaster, so it could be biased in some way also. But you know, we all agree that there's better sources of news than others, and as long as we need to have um, good sources of news and need to tell certain countries and certain people the reality of what's happening outside of their own governmentally controlled area, shortwave is going to be there. I think shortwave is restructuring. It's changing. You know, when the Cold War was there, the purpose of the Cold War was to have everybody give the world an idea of where everybody was with everything that's happening. You know, I mean, there was the Eastern Bloc countries, there was the Western world, and there were a number of countries that were kind of neutral, and everybody wanted to have a voice because it was like, yeah, well, we want to have a voice, we want to tell the world who we are, how we deal with stuff, and what we think about the world events and the news and the things happening. But because of the Cold War, and there were so many countries locked down in the Cold War, I think a lot of countries needed to have a voice. And shortwave was already in decline because we talk about it regularly. I get almost every week I get somebody saying, well, the internet killed shortwave, and it's simply not true. It is not. It has nothing to do with the internet, pretty much. The internet is not what's killing shortwave. If it was killing shortwave, then we would have all of these stations would still be on streaming. So all of the stations from the past would be just thinking, well, we're going to switch our programming to the internet, and people are going to listen there. The majority of shortwave broadcasters, when they left, they just left. They had no intention of not even being. Radio Netherlands, when it left, it wasn't, I'm going to have a voice on the internet. It was, we're gone. There's no need for this anymore. And a lot of it has to do with money. So no, the internet is not killing shortwave. Actually, I say it all the time with shows like this, and with all the schedules and everything that we have handy, it's actually, I think, helping shortwave more than anything else. What's happening is that there's a different focus today on what shortwave is about. Cold War is not there, so all the Eastern Bloc countries became free. And there was a lot of countries that just thought, well, I don't have a need for something international anymore to talk about who we are or why things are like this. A lot of the shortwave broadcasts from the past were from stations that were in the communist and Eastern Bloc countries. They were sending us their own view of why it's, communism is a perfect world. A lot of Western stations existed for the sole purpose of saying why our way of living is the perfect world. You remove that, you removed a lot of why stations were there. And a lot of them, and with the economy, and recessions and stuff, when the economy goes down, where do you cut? You cut stuff that your own population is not going to notice. So where do you cut? You cut, shortwave. Why are we spending millions of dollars there? I mean, if we cut that, nobody knows about it. So they try to find the places where it's easy. So the future of shortwave is the stations that's still going to focus their programming to areas of the world that still need a voice and news of things happening. There are hundreds of millions of shortwave radios out there. And if you tune in to Asia, go to an SDR in Japan or in Asia, you'll notice that Asia as a whole on shortwave sounds like what shortwave was like here in North America in the 80s. Tons of stations, all jam-packed, one next to each other. There's a voice for everything. It's just switching to where around the world. I was listening to Ask WWCR, and I don't know why they haven't been updating their Ask WWCR show for like a month and a half or something. It's the same Ask WWCR that's been playing for the last 6-7 weeks. But they were talking about audience and getting reception reports. And they were saying that they're not getting any reception reports. Which, of course, that also means if you're not getting letters, well, part of your thinking is somebody listening? And that's why I always tell everybody, write into your favorite shortwave broadcaster and let them know you are listening and you like their programs, because it's the only way they know. It's the only way they know that you're out there, and that is going to help them keep their service up. It's the reason why a lot of broadcasters stopped broadcasting to North America. The audience wasn't there. North America stations, people in North America were just not writing in saying, "Hey, I'm listening in." It's kind of interesting, but there is a future for shortwave. And don't forget one thing: if all hell breaks loose, shortwave is a great way of broadcasting. It is the only way that you can broadcast and go beyond the borders of countries, because the internet can be switched off. And don't forget that a lot of stations that are off the air never dismantled their transmission stations. They still have the transmitters up. It's just they're not using them. And I think some countries and some people somewhere are saying, let's keep the let's just keep that there. Maybe someday we would need it for something, Scott George, nice to have you here. Been AMDXing, put new Duracells on my shortwave. Cool. AMDXing is fun. Bobby Burgess making hot dogs. Can you send them over for everybody else? G-Bone 1, yeah, there's amateur television, but I don't see a lot of that. It seems to be some weird thing that we hear about it, but we never see it. Legion says, what do you speak more, English or French? My personal life is French for the most part, because everybody around me is French language. But my English is mostly for all of this and YouTube videos and stuff, and most of what I do online is, I would say on the internet, if all the website I go to, probably 90% are English language, and 5 or 10% are French. But my interaction with people around me, all the people I know, is pretty much always in French. Mickey Delmish says, I know it is not the same, but Radio Sofia English service has a Facebook page that I am on. Huh. What do they do there? What do they say? Are they do they kind of say that one day they're going to come back or something? Supreme Leader. The Supreme Master TV, you mean, Brent? That's broadcast from WRMI. It's some kind of religious, very weird thing. Supreme Master TV, probably you're talking about. One of the things going to be interesting is North Korea, by the way. North Korea with rumors of Kim Jong-un's death. That's kind of interesting. Of course, we have no confirmation of anything. I guess someday some guy's going to show up and is going to be the new guy there, but I don't know. Arthur's Crafter's Kitchen. Didn't think I'd ever be saying this, but these might be the best times to be listening to shortwave since that golden era of the 70s through 90s. And there's still a lot of stuff. To listen to, really, if you take the time, the biggest problem is noise, unfortunately, because when you remove the noise, it's amazing the number of stations you hear. Hey, good Darius. That's why international shortwave is good news, because it's not censored. William Helms, nice to have you here from Florida. Sinan Awad says here in Bulgaria, they decided it's too expensive to keep the shortwave broadcast, so they retired it. Was governmental and probably more relevant when the country was communist. Absolutely. It has a lot to do with that. That's for sure. I mean, when Bulgaria was communist, it wanted to have its voice to tell how fantastic that was. And for the most part, almost everybody did it like that. Here, Radio Canada International simply got off the air because too expensive. We don't have the money for that. Bye-bye. There's no thought of anything else. I mean, it's tough to judge that, because I always like to say to people that tell me, well, they want to close down the shortwave broadcast in my country. And every time I wrote to a station to let them know, that I was sad that they were leaving, I always tell them, your broadcast is the only way I know what's happening in your country. I remember it's Radio Sweden. I wrote to let them know when they were leaving. I said, it's sad because I will not know what's happening in Sweden anymore. And I told them, people don't go on the internet and type, Swedish news. I want to know what's happening in Sweden, But Radio Sweden gave me the Swedish news, plus all sorts of other interesting stuff from that country. It was an interesting way to do it. So, you're removing the voice of your own country when you remove a shortwave broadcast. Joseph Iggenbaum, nice to have you here from California. Mad Radio DXer, nice to have you here. Sheldon Harvey, nice to have you on board. Just saw the message about the special show. G-Bone says, yeah, there's a lot of places where the internet isn't working or is totally censored or you have no idea. 4185 Pirate Station. Upper Sideband. Not getting anything here. Donald Hosmer, remember that neat stuff Radio Peking China sent in the 60s? Got a postcard with soldiers. Said it was Viet freedom fighters killing American gangsters. I mean, nowadays I get travel brochures direct from Hanoi. Yeah. Things have changed, that's for sure. Oh, man. Donald Hosmer says, Radio Canada International, way too quick to destroy. Yeah. That smelled a lot like, conspiracy. The faster we get rid of the transmitters, the less chances people will be able to bring Radio Canada back and annoy us with that on the budget. It pretty much looked like that, which is sad. So HF Underground says there's a power in 4185. I'm not hearing it here. I don't know if anybody is hearing something right now. 4185 upper sideband. Mad Radio DXer, when you were in school, did you have to learn English or was it optional? English was not an option. We have to learn. So I went to school in French. There was a mandatory English lesson, but frankly, English was nobody learned English from school. Nobody. I was lucky because I was already speaking English. So for me, English class was like a really easy thing to go through, especially at the level that they have it here in high school. When I went to high school, I was so good in English that they didn't know what to do because there was not a higher rated class. So they actually put me the next year. So when I got into high school, I was always 1 year ahead of everybody. And I remember one of my friends didn't understand a thing and was failing English. And at the end of the year, I would give him the book. I said, this is the book you're going to have next year, and I have all the answers in it. So he went through high school cheating with my books. Oh, man. Joseph Eckenbound can't pick it up on 4185. There's maybe something really weak. But even, I'm not sure. Degen says he listened. So Calvin says, anything heard on Voice of Korea about that? Voice of Korea is not going to talk about it unless there's an official statement of some sort. I don't think Voice of Korea is a very, very good news source for what's happening with North Korea. Yeah, I'm definitely hearing 4185. There's something. I'm definitely hearing a little something. And I mean, in North Korea, that guy is kind of treated as a god. So, what is interesting, and I would say that what will be very interesting in North Korea will be to see who is going to take his place. I believe he's got a sister, but I don't think they're going to put a woman at the head of North Korea. Because I think he has a sister. Because we've seen his sister with him when he went to, what was it, China? When he went to China for that meeting with, in a couple of places, he was with his sister, apparently. So I don't know, but I don't think his sister is going to be at the end. I'm pretty sure that's the kind of country where, only men do things like that. Who's going to take the place? That's where shortwave's interesting. I mean, we could listen to Voice of Korea and see if there's some mention of anything. We're at the forefront of the news, the international news with shortwave. I mean, let's face it. Listening to Voice of America, BBC, and some other shortwave broadcasters, honestly, I get more world event news from all of that than I do from my local news sources here in Canada. There's half of what's happening in the world that I know because I listen to shortwave. If it wasn't for that, I don't think I know what's happening in the world much, because even the CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, there's some talk of world events, but very little, honestly. So many things I've learned that happened around the world just because I was listening to shortwave and they talked about it. I mean, it's crazy. Mickey Delmage says, generally, Radio Sofia just posts events from around Bulgaria, just like the radio broadcast, but with pictures and written stories. Huh, interesting. Kamaxi 1976, supposed to be Kim Jong-un's sister who will take over. I don't know. Maybe. We'll see. It's going to be interesting. Will having a woman at the head of North Korea make things different? I don't know. Rufus Newt, nice to have you here. My mother, I already said that, but I mean, my mother was French speaking, but never taught me. And I learned was Frenglish. She never liked to talk French unless everyone understood. It's funny because even, when I go out at the Sunday night bar that I go when it was open, so the bartender is a guy that comes from Saskatchewan. I think he comes from Regina, Saskatchewan, where Elizabeth lives. And he, so of course he does speak French, like an English Canadian speaks French, with his accent and all of that. And I mean, he can have a conversation. But I mean, I'm having a beer at his bar, and we're kind of friends. I mean, he's not just a bartender. We go, we had several events that I went to with him to see concerts and stuff. I mean, we're more than just, bartender and client thing. We're kind of, we have kind of a friendship, And when I am at the bar, I speak to him in English all the time. For some reason, I have a hard, I should maybe speak French because I should force him to make his French better. But honestly, I'm happy to speak in English with him. I don't mind. And for some reason, I have a hard time with people speaking French with a heavy accent. And when that happens, I'd rather switch to English directly than hearing that type of French. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. But I speak English so much with that guy that there are people at the bar sometimes that thought I was a English Canadian only. I remember one guy having a beer started to talk to me in English, but bad English because he speaks only French almost. And I looked at him and says, tu peux parler français. You can speak French. And he says, oh, wow, you speak French? And I said, yeah. He says, your English is so good. I was pretty sure you were an English Canadian guy. I said, no, I speak French. My first language was French. It's just that I speak English with him and a couple of other guys that speak only English. But no, you can speak French, no problem. It's just funny. Moria 330, nice to have you on board. Joseph Borg, hey, nice to have you here. Pretty cool to have all of you on board, my friend. What else do we have? What else do we have? Degen says, I think CRI is not QSLing anymore. I wrote them several times and I've never received anything. I don't know. I remember there was a time a couple of years back when they were saying that they were stopping QSLing. But I don't know. Did they completely stop doing QSL? I should write to them. Been a long time. Been a very long time. I was look at that, guys. I'm gonna show you something here. Breaking everything. Oops. Sorry. So back in so this one's broken, but it's still there. It's so nice. Should glue it back. Those that don't know, back when I moved here, because I always told that story, but when I moved here, China Radio International was becoming a really big international broadcaster, and they they asked for official monitors, and an official monitor needed to send in at least something like 5 or 10 reports per week with reception conditions and program details and what I liked and what I didn't like. In return, you were an official monitor, and they would send you tons of gifts. And this is one of the gifts, which is hand-painted bottles. This is one of the gifts that I was sent. So it's really beautiful little hand-painted bottles. And from China Radio. It says here China Radio International on the cover. So I had so many gifts like this. I had this, the hand-painted bottles. I had a scarf, of course, for those that have seen my CRI jacket that I have here. It's still there. It's in front of me over there. Headband, a tennis kit. I got so many things, and they were really, really something. You would write all the time, and correspondence with them was like, every week I would send them tons of things, and I'd get all sorts of these gifts. It was kind of cool. And they even had a moment, and I don't know if it ever happened, but when I started, because one of the things that happens is sending 5 to 10 reception reports and comments. It's fun at the beginning, but after a year, you're like, I'm tired of writing CRI all the time, and I was getting always the same QSLs, so I would get envelopes with 8 QSLs in them, and of the 8 QSLs, there was 7 of the same. I was like, if you're going to send me the same QSL, don't send a QSL. I don't care. I got the gifts anyways. But there was a time at the end when I started getting bored of doing it, where they were actually talking about even giving cash money. If you were a real good monitor, they would actually give you cash. But I don't know if it ever happened, because I got bored. And it was so mysterious because I've said that in the past. They were asking me a lot of personal questions. And at that time, I was a tech guy working at, I was self-employed and fixing computers. They were asking questions that at some point I was almost wondering, wow, are you looking for trying to find spies or something? It was crazy. The personal questions they were asking, that became kind of weird at some point. And I was like, what the hell is those questions? I'm not going to answer those questions to some Chinese, person at the other end. It was weird, I got to tell you. Brian Penny says, voice of Weird Al. So do they have Weird Al Yankovic stuff? Sad that I'm not hearing it better. Weird Al Yankovic stuff. I like Weird Al. Arthur's Alley Crafter says, Radio Canada started doing stories years before they went off the air, grumbling about funds. The writing is always on the wall with them. Hey, I remember the first wave of when Radio Canada International was to get off the air. And I still remember sending my letter to the Prime Minister, and I believe it was Sheila Copps, that was the Heritage Minister or something. She was the one anyways in charge of that. And when we say, is it true that writing a station or writing to keep a station on the air works? Well, that was an example that it did, because we sent enough letters that it convinced the government that no, Radio Canada International was important, and it kept it on the air. I mean, I don't know, that was in the 90s, early 90s, 94, 93, something like that. And it kept Radio Canada on the air for a while. I mean, Radio Canada still exists as a podcast. But honestly, one of the things also that I find kind of boring. So it's like Radio Australia. When Radio Australia was its own independent broadcaster with its own programming, that was the fun Radio Australia. That was the interesting Australia. And with the Pacific reports and stuff, it was the Radio Australia I love to listen to. It's what Radio New Zealand is a little bit right now. You know, last night I was listening to New Zealand. I was like, wow, this is New Zealand, but it's like Australia. It's a dedicated service for not just Australians, but for the Pacific area. And of course, Radio Australia's shortwave as a broadcaster became kind of integrated with the ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. That's when it became less interesting. And that's where it became less important. It was, it was like, well, Australia's on the air, but I'm not super interested in listening to it now. Radio Canada International went into the same phase. It went from its own interesting broadcast of its, that was done by them to a CBC thing. You'd listen to Radio Canada International and hear traffic reports from Montreal, and you're like, what the hell is that? Who cares about the bridge being jammed, packed with cars at 6 a.m. in Montreal when you live in Europe, So there were things like that. It was like, okay, that's getting boring now. And you know what? That's the dangerous part, because I think it shows that part of the people that take the decisions on these stations don't exactly understand what shortwave is all about. And a lot of broadcasters take shortwave as if it would be AM, FM broadcasts. Oh, that's like AM radio. No, it's not. Your audience isn't the same. You're not targeting people around here. You're targeting people far away. And I'm sure there is a loss of listeners from that. And, honestly, if I have a rant at Radio Canada International in the last broadcast, especially the ones in French, I had the impression that Radio Canada International had become the voice of, hey, everybody from African and other countries, come emigrate to Canada. I'm sorry, I don't want to say it, and I don't mean any bad thing by saying it. And I'm not an anti-immigrant or anything. What I mean is that was almost like a publicity broadcasting of, well, here's life in Canada and how things are happening. And now maybe we need more people to come in because of, it sounded like that at the end. And it was like weird. I found it was weird. I mean, and then like I say, it's like I'm okay with immigration and everything. And I don't mean nothing negative in that way of what I just said. Maybe it came out bad and somebody out there's offended right now. Don't be. It's not. There's nothing negative in the way that I said it. It's the way that they were doing it that made me kind of, what's that? Rufus Newt, yeah, they said it was his sister. Yeah. Actually, we don't know. We have no idea. I can tell you that. Calvin says, send Paul the cat. The new leader. Worked for the Egyptians. Ari G says, how do we know he's dead? It could be, we don't know. We don't know. Sheldon Harvey says, Radio Canada International did not leave the air due to lack of funds. Management of service was given to Radio Canada in Montreal. They buried the service. Yeah. Well, it was lack of funds because Radio Canada, when they moved it to Radio Canada, the local CBC, they didn't want to have that. It was safe as long as it stayed at the government level. With that, it was part of the foreign policy of Canada, and as long as it was there, because I think we can all agree that the budget of Radio Canada International was a very small drop of water in Canada's budget, even when Canada had these big budget deficits back in the 90s. It was it was nothing. It really was, and it totally looks like a somebody somewhere wanted that thing to be off, and that's it. And some of the reasoning behind it was the use of, well, we don't want to pay for that, or we don't have the money for that, or whatever. Shannon Harvey says, trust me, I worked with many staffers at RCI, and we know exactly what happened. Too long of a story to tell here, but the bad guys in the story were definitely Radio Canada. Oh yeah, absolutely. When it was moved to CBC, they wanted that thing to die. It was obvious. And the way that it did it, even if I didn't know a lot of the internals, the way that it was done, it felt like somebody wants that thing to die, and it has to do it now. And that's it. It really sounded like that. I can tell you that. It's just look at the speed that they wanted the transmitter site to be destroyed. Somebody somewhere was like, come on, get the bulldozers. It's time to take that thing off, because they're going to ask for this to come back if we don't do it. It really smelled like bad intention, totally. Mitch, nice to have you here from Buckeye, Arizona. I haven't watched a live stream in a while. Well, welcome aboard. Ricardo Silva, nice to have you on board from Portugal. Dejan says, the stupid noise of the PLC devices are giving me headaches. Government should not allow them. There's so much noise around us by different things. In the backyard, I am still thinking that the noise that I have in the sloper comes from a big, big, big chunk to the Bell telephone lines that are in the back. I'm pretty sure a lot of it comes from that. Tristan P, I wonder, could we see an increase in shortwave interest due to the increased monitoring, data collection, and censorship? Because there's so much things happening, and we're in a world where there's a lot of stuff we don't. People kind of don't care anymore, and just crazy. Thunderstorms, unfortunately, in the area of Brian Penny and Cape Cod, unfortunately. Alan Lafferty, nice to have you here, my friend, from the internet. Marvin Motz, nice to have you here from Japan. Shortwave may be an answer to internet censorship. Absolutely, because it has no barriers. It goes everywhere, Calvin says, I got from them a few years ago, RRI and Voice of Vietnam. Bottles are amazing. Yeah, they are. Very nice work. Absolutely. Very, very, very nice work. And painted bottles. Absolutely. These are expensive. I remember a year or two, I was in Chinatown, and they had some of these bottles in little boxes that are cute like that. And it was like $75 per bottle. And if you wanted to have a kit like that with the satin look in the back, it was like $125, $150. It was crazy. Arc R, nice to have you here. Yeah, I think they wanted me to become a spy. It sounded so weird. It looked so weird. WF7I Homebrew, nice to have you here, my friend. Hope everybody's enjoying their Sunday. Absolutely. Mike, WDX50. Nice to have you here from Northwest Arkansas. Leonard Lakey, nice to have you here. I got in a little trouble with requesting a QSL from Radio Bulgaria in the mid-60s. It came up in a security investigation in the 70s when I was working on Air Force One for Boeing. I am not even surprised. I am not even surprised. I mean, in the 80s, when I was writing all of these stations from the Eastern Bloc countries, I, at one point, it's not the kind of thing, because, I mean, at 13, okay, I'm going to stop here for a second, guys, okay? Because you guys want me to refill this? I'm sure you do, because the show's going to continue. So I'm going to go refill, and we're going to talk about what you're talking about. And I'm going to leave you with the soothing sounds of Gander, Newfoundland, Vomit with aeronautical weather on 10051. So the soothing sounds of Gander weather. And I'm back in a couple of minutes. I'll try to find Paul the cat.
Visibility more than 6 miles, clear. Becoming between 1000 Zulu and 1200 Zulu, wind 310 degrees, 8 knots. Halifax, valid from the 26th at 2100 Zulu until the 27th at 1800 Zulu. Wind 200 degrees, 13 knots. Visibility more than 6 miles, 14,000 scattered, ceiling 24,000 broken. Becoming between 2200 Zulu and 0000 Zulu, wind 100 degrees, 7 knots. Ceiling 12,000 broken, 16,000 overcast. From 0500 Zulu, wind 050 degrees, 12 knots, gusting 22 knots, visibility 6 miles, light rain, mist, 300 scattered, ceiling 8,000 overcast. Broadcast of 2100 Zulu MECAR observation. Gander, special 2120 Zulu, wind 310 degrees, 10 knots, gusting 18 knots, visibility 20 miles, fuel clouds at 3,000, fuel clouds at 26,000, temperature 7, dew point -7, wind shift at 2105 Zulu. St. John, time 2100 Zulu, wind 280 degrees, 15 knots, gusting 22 knots, visibility 15 miles, fuel clouds at 2,000, temperature 8, dew point -5.
So that's Gander Radio with weather, 10051. There is also on 13270 and 6604 upper sideband from Gander, Newfoundland, Canada. So as Leonard Lakey was saying, but being in trouble because of writing to Radio Sofia, which was, I believe, the name at the time. When I started listening to shortwave as a teenager and age 13, you don't think about that much. You don't think, whoop, this thing, just make sure that this is okay. Here we go. So you don't think about that much. At 13, of age, I'm not thinking that if I write to a communist country that, anything bad could happen. But as I was getting older in my teenage years, I remember thinking how that might have an effect. And what made me even get more serious into thinking that maybe somebody somewhere was kind of wondering what I was doing was the amount of letters I received at one point. I was like 18, my first years of adulthood. I was 18 or 19. And I got a series of letters coming from either Eastern Bloc countries, or even I had a letter from Syria. And they were all in, I had to sign at the post office to get them. And I thought that was kind of awkward because I had never had that happen before. I have to sign at the post office to get my letters. And you know what? At 18 years old, I started to think, could this be some kind of way of just making sure somebody somewhere wants to make sure that I'm the guy behind these letters coming from communist countries? It felt weird. It never had happened before. And many, many letters that I got were opened up. I mean, I don't know how many letters I got from other countries that were actually opened up. And they were in a mailbox, they were open. Everything was in there, but they were open. Everybody could see what's inside. That also what kind of intrigued me. I was like, why is this letter open? Shouldn't this be, it makes you think about these things. And, Leonard, I'm not even surprised. And especially back then, 60s, 70s, 80s, there was so much hype and so much things happening with all of this and in the Cold War. There was like everybody was suspicious of something, Ingmar Klenhard, nice to have you here. Highly appreciate your shows and all your shortwave work. Spirit of Shortwave is back. Thank you. Happy to be here. Mika Delmich, monitored for Deutsche Welle for many years, and beside the World Radio TV handbook every year, I received many very expensive gifts. As for CRI, they have been doing EQSLs lately. So China Radio does EQSLs. Miki says, "How also have a letter from Sheila Copps." Yep. Yeah, because they would send that official letter back. I remember getting that official letter back. Fast Load, nice to have you here from Montreal. Harry G, no, it's something that happened. Something that happened in the early 2000s, but they're not. They don't ask for any official monitors anymore. Mad Radio DXer, Joe, maybe with Radio New Zealand International doing less external programs could be due to the lockdown situation. Hopefully, just a temporary thing. Yeah, that's possible. That is possible. I mean, there are broadcasters. Look at All India Radio. All India Radio is not having international broadcasting right now. WF7I Ombrew, reading the book that inspired Edwin Howard Armstrong, inventor of the regeneration super heterodyne and FM radio circuits. The Boy's Book of Inventions, 1902. Wow. And, it's very sexist. The Boy's Book. There were no women in radio. It was the Boy's Book. WF7I says the old book is remarkably well preserved, must have just been buried in someone's attic for 100 years. Very, very interesting to hear how new technologies were described. I mean, it's just crazy. It's just crazy. Brett Wayne, 4185 S9 in Salamanca, New York. Let's go back and see if they are still there here. Yeah, definitely something in the noise. Definitely something in the noise. Brett Wayne. So Adijan, how many reports did you send per week when you were QSLing back in the 80s? And how would you write them? With a typewriter? So my first reports. So I asked for my first QSL card. So in August of 82 is when I got the DX100. That manual of the radio explained what QSL cards were all about. And I was like, oh man, I'd like to have a QSL card. You know, kind of that sounded cool. My first report that I sent for a QSL was in October of that year, 1982. And it was for WIFR in, it was in, actually the studios were in Okeechobee. Not Okeechobee, they were in Oakland, California. That's where you would write. But they were the ones behind, Family Radio was the organization behind the Okeechobee, Florida transmitter site that is owned by WRMI today. I wrote one because I wasn't sure. Was I going to receive anything? Was that book telling the truth? And about a month later, there was a nice envelope. I still remember my first envelope. It was a big envelope. It had schedules. It had a QSL card that I have here in my collection. My first ever QSL card. And all sorts of little things in there of different who Family Radio was about, and WRFI and WYFR, sorry, and there were some details of the Okeechobee transmitter site and stuff like that, and a lot of Jesus stuff because Family Radio is primarily a religious broadcaster, and I remember it was like jumping up and down. I was like, oh, this is so cool. Okay, I got to write somebody else now. And slowly started writing in, I would say at my peak. So my peak was somewhere in 1983, 84. I would probably easily send 10 to 20 letters a week with reception reports. The first year and a half, they were all handwritten, and I swear I don't know how these people could read my handwriting because it's the worst in the world. I write something down and I can't even read it myself, so imagine. But somehow it worked. And I was about at 10 to 20 a week. And it was expensive. I mean, I would spend all of my pocket money on sending letters. My main spending of my pocket money for taking out the garbage and stuff was done with was going away at the post office and buying envelopes and paper. And after a year and a half, my parents purchased a typewriter because I had a course. I had taken a course in a typewriter course in high school to improve, because I had a computer, a Commodore VIC-20, and I thought having a typewriter course might actually improve on the speed of my typing, which was totally wrong. It didn't help at all. And so I had a typewriter for my reports after that, which I'm sure a lot of international broadcasters were extremely happy to see. Finally, he's got a typewriter. We can read what he's saying. And God knows, the other thing that is important here is my English from 1985 isn't the same quality as my English from today. So I'm thinking sometimes of, oh man, they must have laughed their head off at stuff that I would send in English, I'm pretty sure. And then I got a printer. I had a printer for the Commodore computer with the dot matrix and the little, feeding paper with little holes on the side. But boy, was I happy to do my reception reports on a computer and print them out on my printer. That was kind of cool. And so, but I would send 10 to 20, if not more. I would send so much that, especially when I was with when my friend Jean-Pierre had his realistic R100, DX100 also. We would do reception reports together because he couldn't understand English. And he was, his parents were Italian. He understood Italian. And there was a couple of stations that were broadcasting in Italian that I wanted QSL cards. And he would help me with the Italian language for the QSL reporting. I would help him with the English language for the QSL reporting. And of course, we had the French in common that we would do reception reports. And we were always going together to the post office. And I remember going to the post office one day. So the post office we would go to is the one where he lived. There was a big post office that still exists, not very far from where I live here. But we would go to a postal counter. It was a smaller post office within a jewel store. It was a jewelry store. And they had a postal office in the jewelry store. So I remember, because it was at the corner of the street where he lived, I would go and meet him. We would do some radio stuff together. And then we would go in at the post office, buy stamps. And I still remember, it was the woman that was there. We went there so many times. And one day we asked, I go there and ask for like 40 stamps for international letters, which were then 64 cents each. I still remember the price, 64 cents each. And I remember she looked at us one day and she said, okay, guys, I am curious and I have a question. You guys are here every week buying stamps for international letters. I want to know, what are you guys doing? And so we started talking to her about, well, we listen to shortwave broadcasting and we write to stations all over the world and they send us all sorts of things and gifts and QSLs and blah, blah, blah. And we told her, he said, next week when we come for the stamps, I'm going to bring you some examples. And we brought with us, letters. I remember bringing letters from Radio Moscow and all sorts of, the QSL cards and letters from HCJB in Quito, Ecuador. And so we put that there. She looked at it and she spent there was never a lot of people there at that counter. So it's like she spent like half an hour looking at our stuff. She looked at us and she said, guys, I am so impressed with what I see here and what you guys are doing. It's just fantastic. And every week then we would go and get our stamps. And she was like, oh, more letters to the stations this week. Yep, pretty much. It was a good time. I still remember, man, that was such a good time. And it was a good time for me because it took me away because, I'm not going to go into details, but my personal life was very, very complex with what's happening with my family. And that was a good time. It would be that thing that I was somewhere else. I was doing something that I didn't have to deal with what's happening in my personal life. That was the fun thing. When I say sometimes I think shortwave is probably something that saved me from maybe becoming a real bad guy or whatever. I don't know. I couldn't turn out the way it was my teenage years. I mean, it was so bad that I could have turned a really, really bad guy. It all depended on who you're with and what you do. And I think, and I still think today, shortwave radio was probably kind of a savior of who I am today and why I am a a guy that does decent, has a decent life. So cheers, everybody. Laird Nigel Lawrence, nice to have you here. G0MEJ, KG0PL. Oh, man. Let's used to listen to Radio Canada International. I mean, Radio Canada International was one of those really loved international broadcasters, honestly. Okay, let's try to catch up again. Brent Erickson says, my son who is 10 lives with his mom in another state. If I wanted to share shortwave with him, what radio or what tactic would you think would work? Well, you should. Honestly, I think everybody, even a kid, is probably intrigued by anything that looks electronic, including a radio. I think a kid with a portable radio that has digital readout and buttons on it is at least at a minimum is interested in or intrigued with what that could be. You know? Lee Thompson, nice to have you here from Indianapolis. Broadcast Monitor, nice to have you here from Austria. And first time viewer here in this channel. Seems to be professionally made. Thank you very much. Nice to have you here, my friend. Jay Watterson 69, nice to have you on board. Mike, WDX50, been decades since he's written QSLs. I need to do it again. Also, I need to do it again. Mike says WDX50 says, I think my mom threw away all QSLs after I moved to college. Oh, that's just sad. Oh man, I would have been so mad if I'd learned that somebody threw away my QSL collection. I mean, I already have find it sad that the box with letters and all sorts of things that I had received, I don't have it anymore. But the QSLs are that thing that is, no, throw away my QSLs, and man, I'm so sad. That's why I am about 60% done in scanning them, so that if something happens, fire, whatever, I'll have them electronic, at least. What else do we have? Donald Hosmer says, my mother stored all my QSLs from the 60s. When I got back into the hobby in the early 80s, I was very thankful for her doing that. Oh, cool. Yes, no, it's not just you, Donald Hosmer. It's, you know what? Every time I say Valmet, and I personally think I'm always saying vomit. So it's a vomit station. But don't worry, I hear it too. So I'm like, I need to pronounce it better. Mark Rich, Radio Moscow never sealed their envelopes to me in the 80s with schedules and QSLs. Yeah, I do remember a lot of their of Radio Moscow's letters were pretty much always open. I wonder if even there, when Radio Moscow was sending letters, even there in Russia, they were skeptical of what are they sending to these Western Bloc countries. Oh, man. Donald Hosmer says, once when I was in school in the 60s, my mother got a visit from our home by an FBI agent. She showed him my shack and the QSL, realized it was just a radio hobbyist. You know, there was so much hype and so much craziness back then. Everybody was a suspect of being a commie or whatever. Yeah. That's crazy. Those were crazy times. Legion says, I also always wonder what the postman thinks when he delivers letters from North Korea, Vietnam. Yeah, I mean, we're not all alone, and today it's different. I mean, I'm sure there are some people receiving letters from all around the world because there's so much immigration. But you know what? In the 80s, I remember, it's not like today. Today, for some reason, the postman is never the same guy. It's like I look at every week. I look, except for the guy in the truck that delivers my packages. That's been the same guy for like 3 years. The postman that puts the letters in the mailbox, every week I have the impression it's somebody different. I don't know why. But anyways, back in my teenage days, it was always the same guy. And I remember one day I was going down and to the mailbox, and he was there, and I was like, "Oh," I was coming down to see if I have mail, and I said, so he says, "Oh, which one?" I says, "Oh, that, this address." And he looked at me and says, "Oh, okay, you are the guys, He says, "You're the guys." He said something like, "Your father seems to receive letters from all over the world." And I said, "Oh, it's not my father, it's me." And he says, "Oh, really?" He says, "Yeah, I listen to international broadcasts on shortwave, and I write to them, and they write back." And as he was putting the letters, he said, "Well, you got letters from, I had like Austria and Sweden and whatever, and give it to me." He says, "So you got some correspondence." And he was intrigued. He asked me a few questions. He says, "Oh, really?" He got like, "Yeah, it's stations you can listen to the radio with a radio and." From different countries around the world, and it's really cool, and I write to them and they write back, and he was kind of intrigued. It was like, oh wow. And it's funny because after that, when I was in my summer vacation from school, sometimes I was on the balcony waiting for the postman. I was literally waiting for the postman because it was like, am I going to get letters today? I'm going to get goodies. And I remember he was passing by and was like, "Sorry, nothing for you today." I was like, oh darn, nothing for me today. Oh. I like those things, Donald Hosmer. When you go to YouTube and you just type "duck in cover" and you look at the videos and you're like, really? Okay, so if there's a nuclear bomb, I just, duck in cover and I'm gonna be safe. Apparently, of course, there's no. I have no bomb shelter here though. That, and what you read, like it's like, oh well, Matthew's neighbor has a bomb shelter. It's like, oh wow, I can imagine the kid coming to us, "Mom, why don't we have a bomb shelter here in the basement?" Crazy times. Legion, my first ever QSL card, WRMI. Cool. Hey, take care, Mad Radio DXer. Stay safe. Mike WDX50, first QSL Radio Netherlands, probably 1980. Hey, share your first QSL, everybody. What's your first QSL? So my first QSL, WIFR, Family Radio, in October of 1982. That's my first QSL. I remember my second. My second QSL was Radio Korea. So KBS World Radio today from South Korea was called Radio Korea back then. That was my second. I still remember the envelope with the little string that you have to unwind from the round thing in the back to open the letter. I always found that fascinating. It's like, why do you have these little strings? This is so weird. They don't lick. They just put strings there. Mark Rich, I still have the exercise book from the 80s with all my records of stations heard and 5-number signal rates. It's like a walk back through memory lane. Oh man, yeah. I got my logbooks here. I would buy nice big books and put pages. I have pages of every week. I would do what I would do in a logbook, I would put every page was a week, because I didn't want to put in my logbook a repeat of things I've heard before. But there were so many stations back then that there were so many things you could hear that you were not hearing before, or a long time. It was crazy. But you look at the stations in there and you're like, oh man, look at all the stations I was logging like this so easily back then. Peter Lyon Switchboard. Nice to have you here. Check out their Resonator by Shelf Life, who are on Switchboard Independent Records of Glasgow. Tractor feed paper. Yep, that's it. Frank Ireland. Sometimes they had to go to the post office to buy international reply coupons. Oh, man. Yep. They never knew what IRCs were. Never knew what IRCs were. I would go to the post office. Yeah, I'm going to have 6 international reply coupon. And they were super expensive. They were really expensive. And I remember going there. It's like the guy was staring at me with, we don't have that here. Yeah, you do. I purchased some 2 weeks ago. Okay. And then there's some older guy that would come and says, yeah, he's asking for that thing. It's in the orange book over there. They're yellow things. Yeah. It was so funny because at one point I would just go and it was like, yeah, I need 4 international reply coupons. I don't think we have that here. Yeah, they're in the orange book over there. Somewhere in the middle. They're yellow. And he would go and it's like, yeah, I should actually work. I was thinking to myself, it's like, I should actually work here. I know more where the stuff is than the actual guy at the post office. Nobody knew what they were. Nobody knew what these things were. It was crazy. Oh, man. Understand the times. I used to monitor WYFR in the late 90s. They wanted a monthly report and provided the form of your signal data. They would send random QSLs to me during that time. Oh, interesting. Mike WDX50 bought plenty of IRCs back in the days. Mark Rich, I remember ISU coupons too, and confusing post office staff who didn't know what they were. They had a big book with tabs they had to search through. It pretty much looked like that here too. And it was even worse. You know what? Is that they would give it to you, and I was like, yeah, but they're going to be stamped. Because they were the coupons, and there was like a circle where they needed to stamp. That was the proof that they were paid for. So they would just give it to me, and I was like, no, they got to be stamped. They're not worth anything like that. And then he would like, yeah, but with what? And then, and the old guy was like, yeah, you got to use that stamp, make sure that the date is right and the post office information is okay. And if you stamp it, it needs to be stamped really well because all the information needs to be perfectly readable. Oh, God, that was crazy. Yeah, today, DGen here, the post office are like everywhere. There's a postal counter in every 2 corner streets. But back then, it was kind of more of exceptional. Back then, we had a big post office, which is where I would go a lot. And there was a couple of counters, but there was not a lot of them back then. WF7I, 5346.5. Let's check it out. Yep, definitely some hams chatting along 60 meters.
Something if you fire low, yeah, 50-40, he's doing there a lot. I tell you what, if you ever want some really strange listening, listen to Radio Havana. I think they're usually around 6 megahertz.
That's interesting. They're talking about shortwave. It's talking about Radio Havana on 5040. They're talking about shortwave, 5346.5. Jay Watterson wants a QSL from Paul the Cat. I need to make QSL cards for Paul the Cat and send them out. I could print them now. I got a nice printer for that. Okay, guys, we're gonna do a little something. Give me a couple of weeks, and because I don't want to have to spend $1 million on that, but if in a couple of weeks we're going to check out, if you guys do a little donation of something, I'm going to send everyone that sends a little something a QSL card with Paul the Cat in the radio. I'm going to try to find some way of doing a really nice picture with Paul in a radio. We're going to check it out. Mark Rich, well, if Paul would be transmitting through his tail, it would. I'm pretty sure it would go pretty far. That is a nice thing also, DGen. When having QSL cards from stations that are gone, long gone, that brings you really nostalgic, I got to say. Frank Ireland, I wish I could remember what happened to my Lloyd's shortwave radio that I got in 73, 74. Cherished it so, cannot figure out why I don't remember what happened to it. You know, sometimes there are things, we have life events, and I got a little blank on some, like my AM Ernie in the bathtub radio. I don't know what happened to it. I remember the 9-volt clip-on was broken, and what I would do is I would take the two wires, the red and the black, and put them directly on the battery with a piece of tape, and then close down the little door, and it would still work. But I don't know where and how it disappeared at some point. But that's a long time. That was 1977, 78. I was like 8 or 9 years old. Oh man, I'd like to have one of those again. And there are some on eBay, but they're too expensive. I'm not going to buy, I'm not going to pay $60 for Ernie in the bathtub AM radio. Come on. Kimberly, K6YYL from a hot and sunny Southern California. Yarabamba, nice to have you here. 11915 Arabic station is 11915 is Radio Saudi from Saudi Arabia. Leonard Linky, anybody remember Aerogram? That's what I requested QSL cards on. That rings a bell, but I don't remember Aerogram something. Nicholas Milnes, nice to have you here from Manchester, UK. Legion, same thing here. Postman is different guy every few weeks. Legion says, but same thing here. I always wait for the postman, and I'm always hyped if I'm receiving anything. Frank Ireland, first QSL, HCJB. Oh, man. And those were nice. And I liked HCJB and all of these stations that had series of QSLs. Because obviously they wanted us to write. So they would have series of QSLs. You would write regularly to get, I remember being mad at HCJB because I had written for the last QSLs of a series. I don't remember which one it was. From like 1985 or 86. And they actually sent me the new QSL of the other year. And I was like, oh, no, that's not the one I wanted. I wanted the last one of last year. I would have had the series. I never did. Magazine 76 says, duck and cover, also known as kiss your butt goodbye. Mark Rich, first QSL, Radio Moscow, second Vatican Radio. Wow. I've got at least 3 or 4 QSLs from Vatican Radio that has Pope John Paul II face real big on it. It's like, yeah. Dejan says, my second QSL was Voice of Vietnam. Oh, this is cool. Brett Wayne says, under the desk, it's okay. Okay. You think a big desk like this is going to be fine? Hey, they zapped my SDR play, but I'm fine. I'm under a big desk. REG, are they still doing a QSL? Also, buying an Icon 7300, does it come with everything I need, or do I need to buy other things? You've got everything you need to start, but you will need an antenna with it. That's for sure. But it comes with the basics of everything you need to operate. But you will need an antenna, that's for sure. A good antenna. WSI Homebrew, my first QSL was with ham operator. I regret to say never got in shortwave QSL. Oh, okay. I don't want to see you anymore. I'm joking. You should. You should ride to a station and get one. Frank Ireland, Diller sent me a straw coaster and a front page from the Keto newspaper because I was collecting foreign newspapers. Oh, man. Steve Richard, do you have a QSL card from any Antarctica station? No, unfortunately. The one I would like to have is LRA 36. That is still operating. Artist Crafter's Kitchen. First QSL was Radio Canada, 1978. Now I have today got my QSLs and my logbook. Lee Thompson, my first was from CO3IGY, International Geophysical Year from Havana. Oh, interesting. W5BL, I got my first QSL from Radio Havana, Cuba, April 27, 2018. 6165. WF7I Homebrew, 11820 Arabic. Yeah, that's Radio Saudi, Saudi Arabia. Jim F, first QSL. Jim F, first QSL. I lost the space, sorry. I'm just here. Should have find the place where I was. HCJB, around 1973. Frank Ireland, HCJB, also read my letter on musical mailbag. You know what would amaze me of these shortwave stations is when you would write to a station like 6 months later, and the station would come back and say, hey, nice to have news from you. Or you would listen to their mailbag, and it was like, oh, it's Gilles in Montreal. And I remember 6 months ago, you were mentioning that you were also using a Commodore computer and enjoying computing and blah, blah, blah. I hope that is going well. And it's like, wow, they took notes of who I am and what I do, because they were able to come back and say, oh, yeah, you're the guy with a Commodore computer and having fun. Frank Ireland says, HCJB also read my letter in the musical mailbag. I like the musical mailbag. It was kind of fun. That was the one where they were eating at the same time. They were always bringing like cookies and cakes and stuff. I was trying to imagine. I remember listening to musical mailbag as a teenager. And I remember that was a Saturday night lineup, actually. So I would listen to musical mailbag. And I think after musical mailbag was the DX party line. And I remember I was watching musical mailbag, and when they were talking about food and stuff that were in the studio, I had images in my head of what the cookies might look like, or radio has that side to it also. Is part of our radio listening is having an image in our head of something they're talking about. I mean, we're trying to have some way of visualizing whatever somebody's talking on the radio. And I remember in musical mailbag, I was trying to visualize the cookies and the cakes and the stuff and the smell in the studio, maybe, of what it might be like, and thinking, wow, it must be fun to be there, K6YYL. My first QSL card was from W7SDR, who gifted me my first rig, the Kenwood TS130S. He put the card in front of my nose to get my amateur radio license, so I'm glad now I'm an extra. Cool. That is nice. Let's go for it, for sure. WF7I, take care, my friend. It's always fun to have you on board. Frank Ireland says, information on my first QSL, request to HCJB, so they sent a card. but checked off boxes saying reception was not confirmed. Oh, really? I had 1 or 2 letters from HCJB saying, well, we got your reception report, but the frequency was missing. What? You're not sending me a QSL because my frequency was missing? You know I was listening. Just put something there. You know I was listening. You know what time. Just put the frequency. Darn it. You know I was listening for real. That infuriated me every time that they would do that. It was like, what? The last time that HCJB pissed me off, so you know what? I'm going to try tonight because I'm wondering, does HCJB still QSL? Does anybody know? Last time I tried, I didn't try after because I was like pissed off. I had sent a reception report on that 6050 kilohertz frequency. And the reply that I got back by email was, sorry, but we don't QSL on broadcasts that are not from HCJB's own studios. Because apparently the show that was playing was a recorded show from something else. And I was like, what? What the hell's what's that type of answer? I might not be done by HCJB, but it's still your signal I'm listening to. I'm going to try it again tonight. I'm curious. Do they QSL? It's going to be my experiment tonight. I promise, guys, I'm doing a HCJB reception report on 6050 tonight, if it's good enough. And we're going to check out, does HCJB still QSL? Nicolas Milnes using the Yisu FR770 receiver with wire on a very high tree, using fishing rod and fishing weight. That's perfect. That's perfect. 11820, yeah. Praying station is that Radio Saudi. Lee Thompson wants to send Paul IRCs. Oh, man. Degen, sometimes I would do is write a reception report on a postcard to save money on the postage. I mean, it's expensive. You know, if today was, let's say that today was the golden age of shortwave, and I would be the teenager that's writing today. I mean, postage stamps for international is about 2.5 times more expensive than it was. Plus, they have, back then, you would just put stuff in the envelope and they would just send it. Today, it's like, if it weighs more than, this amount of grams, we're going to charge you more for it. They're like super, it's like totally crazy. Jeff Barrett, nice to have you here, my friend. Pandemic DXers, I like that. Pandemic QSLs. Pandemic DXers, sorry. But Pandemic QSLs is also a good one. Jersey bound, great to see you live on this Sunday. Nice to have you here from New Jersey, my friend. Very strong signal, 11755. 11755. No. It's 11750. Well, there's that high whining tone that I kind of hate. Let's check it out here. That is space 11750. I think that's a broadcast only on Sunday. 11750. 11750. And this is It's not written here. There's no broadcast officially from there, but that is probably some religious broadcast from like WRMI or something on 11750 or WHRI. Oh, could that be WBCQ? Could that be one of the new frequencies? I'm wondering. I'm hearing WBCQ 9330. It's different. So that may be WHRI or from WRMI. It's not here on the list of stations, 11750. It has a high winding pitch, which is not typical of WRMI. And I know that WHRI does have a high winding pitch sometimes on some frequencies. So I don't know. Really strong Pirate 5150. WREC 5150 upper sideband. WECradio@gmail.com. So strong Pirate 5150 upper sideband. WREC 5150 upper sideband. Yarrabamba's first QSL, Radio Nacional Amazonia, still strong after so many years and 25-meter band. Cool. Mike Thompson, the ICOM 300 also requires a good 13.8 DC power supply. Oh, yeah. I guess, can you guys answer that question? I guess most transceivers today do not come with their power supply. You either have to buy the one that they want to sell you or get one that is good. I forgot about that, but I mean, the Yaesu FT450 here, I have a 30 amp power supply here from Pyramid to run it right now. So that is something you might need. You might need a power supply with it. And if you transmit, you need a good power supply. Frank Ireland, DX Party Line hosted by Clayton Howard. Yeah, I've got their farewell card, which is crazy. Legion is very cool when they know you in the mailbag shows. Radio Taiwan and KBS already know me because I'm writing every week. Cool. I think I'm one of their youngest listeners, and that's perfect. You know what? They want to know. They want to see that young people are still listening. St. Joseph 74. That's all Joseph 74. First shortwave QSL, HCJB 76. Nice to have you here, AG5QQ. You know, I think a lot of us got, our first, I mean, they were an international broadcaster that was very, very powerful. I think one of the first stations a lot of us encountered in the 70s, 80s was HCJB in Quito, Ecuador. They were dominant on the shortwave frequency range. That's true, Dejan. You know what? Dejan says it's very funny that I always hear the same people writing in. You know, it gets to a point where, that's why I say to people, write, because there's a very small amount of people that write. Look at a more local event. Me and Sheldon, when we do the International Radio Report, we always talk about, unless people comment that they're listening in, we don't have a lot of feedback of people listening in, but we know there are people out there. And when we have comments of people listening in, it's always the same people. It's the same for shortwave broadcasters. There's a small amount of people that write in and take the time to do it. But you know what? There's a lot more people listening in. Look here, the live show. There's a lot more people watching it than people interacting with us and letting us know that it's there. And last night I was listening to Radio Romania's French language broadcast. Okay, I'm going to tell you, they had the mailbag show in French, And I will tell you that the 5 or 6 names that they mentioned yesterday are people I've heard a long time ago. Not just that, I was part of a French language club in the 80s. Half of them were people active in the 80s and they were in that French language shortwave club, which means it's the same people again today that are still active. And yes, there's just a small portion of people actually taking the time to write to let stations know they exist. Solid Flyer 1, first QSL, Radio Sweden. Second, Radio Netherlands. Third, Radio Budapest. Back in the late 70s. Cool. Nicholas Milnes thinking of buying the Yaesu FT450D, going for a ham license. Cool. Go for it. Mickey Dalmich, back in the 70s. Let me just. Radio Netherlands had to record their programs 3 weeks in advance of airing so they could send the tapes to the relay stations. They would send a postcard telling when your letter would air. You know, we don't think about that, but even them had all the delays of everything. I mean, come on. They had to record a program 3 weeks in advance and actually send the tapes to the relay stations. You know, I mean, look at us today in the International Radio Report. We just do it, put an MP3 file, send it. It's there on the Sunday. You know, things have changed like crazy since then. Imad Abbas, nice to have you here, my friend. Toujours un plaisir. Frank Ireland, they sent me the QSL, but it said, we feel sure that you have heard our one of our transmissions, but yeah. Hey, Brian. Yeah, unfortunately. 5150 WREC Pirate right now. Real strong. Mickey Damage, I have seen recent ECJB QSLs from the Germany relay, but not sure of the address. Okay. Maybe I should. Is there PO Box 691 Quito, Ecuador still good? Understand the times. I got a QSL from HCJB, Voice of the Andes, Andy Condor from March 1998. I do have the Andean Condor card from that here. I have one also. Mark Rich recalls an apology from Radio Moscow after Adam Adamov on his mailbag show ridiculed my letter asking questions as a fake, trying to trip him up. I never listened to his show again. You know, he was quite a character, that Adamov guy. So, you know. Dejan says, same thing here. German Postal Service increased their postage for international letters by 20 cents. Now they're 10 euros. So that would be like $2 Canadian. Wow. Dejan 11750, also very strong in Germany. Calvin, any more scanner stories? So, okay, I talked about the scanner story of the neighbor having phone sex. I talked about the the drug dealers. I talked about the money left in the mailbox. When I moved there, so let's see. Okay, one scanner story from where I was living before, is I bought a Sanyo 49 megahertz cordless phone. And, you know, back then, because at some point, the cordless phones had what they called like digital codes or something, because to make sure that you're not connecting to a neighbor's phone, it was important to have that. So I purchased this Sanyo cordless phone, and of course, I'm a very curious guy. So I got to try stuff. And one of the first things that I want to try is, what if I unplug the base station? Am I going to hear phone conversations from other people? Because I'm curious. So I unplugged the base, and I'm hearing a woman talk on the phone. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And she's real strong. And I'm listening and I'm like, hello? And she's immediately she says to her friend, did you hear that guy voice say hello? And I'm like, oh my God, she's actually hearing me. It's like my phone is tapped into the same base as hers and it actually works. We're too close. And, of course, I just shut up because, like, oh. So that's the first thing. Second time that I try it, I'm like, okay, so I can tap into her phone. I unplug the base station. Now I'm hearing only static. And I press a few times, I press like the connect or call button or whatever. And I'm hearing a dial tone. I can actually phone. That's where I understood that I'm phoning from somebody else's phone because we probably have the same phone. And it took me a long time before I knew where it was. So I would live in the second story of a house, and then next door neighbor, second story also, there was a woman living there, and I mean it was a short distance. Our windows would be like, I don't know, 12 feet apart, not more. And one day I heard her talk to her landlord, and I recognized the voice immediately. And I was like, oh, she is the one that I can actually trip the phone. I mean, come on. Imagine a bad guy. I never did anything because I'm not that type of guy, but imagine a bad guy. A bad guy could have like, oh, I can talk to my neighbors, I could talk to my family in another country or whatever and make these long distance calls. Like super easy now. And that's where I understood that at some point there were these phones that had these codes. You had to put the phone on the base so that the code match, because they understood that people were making calls with other people's phones without that. So that was one interesting. When I moved here, there was this old woman that lived 2 houses down. So, big story short, when I moved here in 2000, this street is only little houses. Okay. Where I live and on the other side of the street are the two only places where it's like 6 tenants in a building that's 3 stories high. The rest of the house, I live, it feels like I live from, a suburb. Some of you have seen some pictures. It's like living in a suburb here. So I could see real far. It's really nice. When I moved here, of course, one of the first things you do is scan your neighborhood for what are the people around you and who are they. There was this old woman, and around here, every house was old people. And if I had to say one of the sad stories of where I live here, I mean, when I got here, I was 30. So when I got here, I was 31 years old. I'm 51 today. 20 years. 20 years. I'm still trying to figure out, man, I was 31 when I moved here. Crazy. Anyways, every house was an old folk. They were old. When I say old, it was like they were old, all above 70 years of age. And I was 30, so they were like super old for me. At 30, at 70, you're super old. At 51, at 70, you're like, well, I'm not that far off. It's a question of it's relative to whatever age you are. But there was a lady 2 houses down, because she would give her address all the time, so I knew she was like 2 houses down. She would call in every company she bought products from, every single company. She would call Tide, and she would say, yeah, I think it's Procter and Gamble that has that, but I don't know. Anyways, she would call out the big gun companies of the different brands, and she would say, yeah, well, I made my cleaning yesterday, and your soap doesn't smell the same. I don't like the scent. and they would actually say, "We're so sorry. We're going to send you coupons for free products." She would do that with every single thing she purchased. I don't know how many times I heard it. Like, and when the company, when the person was like, "Yeah, but blah blah blah," she started about, "Well, I have cancer and I'm gonna die soon," and blah 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 blah. And they would actually cave in at some point. It was like, she's getting freebies from every company because she's ranting at everything she purchases. It was just like, I was like, okay, she's got free. Maybe I'm not ranting enough. I don't know. So it was like, I remember that, and it's like, oh god. But you know what? It puts me a little in a little nostalgia because every every old folk that lived around here died in the 20 years I'm here. It's kind of weird, It's like, wow. I on the other side of the street was the last remaining old folk that was here when I moved here, and he was, well, it's a couple, they're a married couple, and he was, when I got here in 2000, he was 75, and until last year, he was all like, bent and crippled and what do you want, but he would go out and walk his two dogs. And every time he would see me, he was like super happy to talk to me. It was like, "Oh wow, you're one of the only ones that lives here for long enough that we can talk, and I know you." And I remember we would talk every time I would go out. He was walking his dog. We would talk for like 20 minutes, half an hour. And about a month and a half ago, I woke up in the morning, and I was with my coffee. I looked outside, and I was like, "There's an ambulance," and I thought, "Oh, I don't know what's happening." And I saw that it was him that were bringing the ambulance, and I had no news for the past month and a half. I had no news, and I saw the landlord on the other side, and about a week ago, and I said, "Hey, the man and his wife that was living there, and said, "Oh, the man died a month ago, and she decided to go to an old folks home." And it's like, "Oh wow, okay." So old man's died. The last of the people that I knew from when I moved here is gone now. It's like, feels weird. Feels weird because I'm thinking, well, okay, you're the next old man that's going to live to 80 in this apartment, and you're going to be like one of the old people that was there when you moved in here at 30. I don't know, it makes you think, and it makes you feel like, wow. So sorry guys. It is not COVID-19, and if it was, I don't think it's electronically sent. Arnold Feldman, nice to have you here. K3TEL in the state of Maryland. God, wow. Okay. Sorry, guys. Mike Thornton says most ham transceivers, except for the very high-end ones, require a separate power supply. It's crazy. I mean, 30 years ago, power supplies were included with everything. Today's like, no, you got to buy that thing. Mickey Dalmish says, try this. HJB World Radio, P.O. Box 39800, Colorado Springs. I'm going to try that. I'm going to take the address into my phone here. I'm going to take the address. I'll take the address here like this. Here we go. So like that, I got it. And I'm going to try that. I'm going to try QSL. So nice to have you here, Arnold. Hope you enjoy. Frank Ireland, 1995, when I was living in Tempe, Arizona, my apartment was a mile from ASU, where Super Bowl 30 was being played. Use my Radio Shack scanner to look for the Goodyear blimp frequency. Never found it, but found something better. Found the TV control room. Director would call the camera shots. Oh man, I had several of these here. It was so cool. This is so cool when you get one of those TV stuff and you hear the guy saying, okay, camera 1, camera 4. And then they go into a like advertisement and you hear them talk. It's like, okay, well, next time I'm going to do this and that. And oh, by the way, sorry for whatever happened. And it's like, it's just so cool when you hear these things. I heard them regularly here. I remember when I was listening to the scanner, there was a CBC feed from Radio Canada. And in the news bulletin, one of the newscast announcers, every time they would go into an advertisement, he would sing. And I was like, okay, that guy looks like fun. He sings. I remember another announcer that was one of the big announcers here at CBC. And every time he would go into some ads, he would rant and say, well, I'm not going to do this. And that was bad. And you better brush up because that is horrible. And it was like, whoa, that guy is a bad temper. Oh, man. Yarabamba, remember for small, humble radio stations in South America where I live, and mostly in the tropical bands, they were so proud to receive listening reports. Oh, man. I miss the times when there were tons of little South American stations that you could write. And I still remember Radio Reloj from Costa Rica. And they sent a QSL card. And in the back, it's written in big letters, IRC next time. Meaning, like, you better put an IRC if you want a QSL card next time. Oh, man. Frank Aaron says, I then patched headphones jack to the AV inputs of my VCR and recorded the last half of the game. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Calvin says, very good, Joe. Thank you. No, my birthday was in March, Kimberly. March 20th. I am 51 now. I'm an old geezer. That's why I do shortwave. I'm an old guy. Oh, man. Dejan, what did your classmates say about your hobby? Did they know about it? Hey, Tom the Extra, take care, my friend. It's nice to have you on board. See you Wednesday. Absolutely. I don't know about you guys, but okay, I got another question. Let's do an interaction show here. What was your age? So how old were you when you started shortwave listening for the first time? I want to know how old you were when you actually listened to shortwave for the first time. So technically, because I didn't know it was shortwave, because it was SW and it was a multi-band radio, I was probably 11 or 12 years old. Officially, because I knew what it was with the Realistic DX100, so I was 13 years old. So I want to know how old were you the first time you listened to shortwave? Larry Cordy, nice to have you here. So when I went to high school, shortwave was not something I'd talk about. Okay, I was a low profile guy. For me, high school is not a problem. I got a friend of mine that high school was really, really tough. He was the guy that everybody laughed about and so on. Which is not my case. In my case, high school was under the radar, nothing special. And people were like, well, Gilles is that electronics guy geek and computer geek. So I was like respected somehow. But at the same time, I wasn't very social. I was in my little bubble back then. And but high school, for me, high school is, I would do it again. I would do it again. I would go back and do it again without any hesitation. I was one of those that was like, no, got no problem in high school. But at the same time, I did not really speak out about what I was doing back then. I was not the guy that would speak out about his hobbies. when somebody would talk to me a little bit about stuff, I would talk about electronics and stuff. I avoided shortwave a lot because for me, guy to guy talk was like, well, electronics and you can solder that transistor on that things was cool. I was not really into, I would listen to Radio Moscow yesterday and it was really fun. They read my letter. I wasn't there. So I did not really talk much, except when I was in high school, there was a French class. One of the French class things was to talk about something you love in front of the class. So you had to make, that it was supposed to last 15 minutes. And for 15 minutes, you had to talk about what you love, something you love. And I decided to talk about shortwave radio. And I was 15 years old at the time. I got there. I was in class with my realistic DX 302, which I was so proud. Piece of wire, because I wanted to impress everybody. I had noted the time and frequencies for Radio Moscow French language that I knew was coming in pretty well here. I was just hoping propagation was hold and would work. And I had with me a pile of letters and QSL cards. And of course, I didn't choose any QSL card. I chose the stuff that is amazing. Like, that's Radio Moscow. That's the USSR. And Radio Berlin and East Germany. And, stuff like that. And Radio Australia. And, showing everybody that, I listen to the world and I'm not joking. And, I had magazines. I had all sorts of pennants and stuff that, I just put that and it was going through the class. Everybody was like watching all of that while I was talking about it. And it's funny because everybody lasted like 15 minutes, and even 15 minutes, they didn't know what to talk about anymore. Me being in front of the class, and probably that's why I'm talking for 3 hours at a time. Probably already had that from that time. I talked for 60 minutes, 1 hour. Because the teacher would usually stop people after 15 minutes. The teacher was so impressed that he just couldn't stop me. He's just like, go ahead. And I remember when I did that bit on shortwave, the teacher said, I didn't stop you because I was fascinated with what I heard, what I've seen. It was just so amazing. I thought, talk about it. I'm just amazed at what you're talking about. And I don't even know it exists. He didn't know. My teacher, so in 1985, 6-ish, my teacher was in his 50s. He was in his 50s. And he didn't know about shortwave. Imagine the guy in his 50s in 1985 not knowing about shortwave. Kind of interesting. He just let me go. He was like amazed. And I remember he got up and he said, oh, by the way, I'm going to say it right now. You got 98% and for your for what you just did. It's just so amazing. But so maybe I was already like, predisposed or prepared for doing live shows like this on YouTube today. That was the only time I actually really frankly talked about shortwave, honestly. I don't know why. For some reason, I was in the impression that it was uncool to go too much into geekness. So I was like, I'm the geek, but I'm socially adapted geek, that I'm not going to talk about geek stuff too much. And I'm going to be more into the mainstream stuff because I don't want to, go crazy about it. But honestly, it was I didn't talk much about it. That's for sure. That's for sure. And 25 years later, we have our I class of our high school reunion. 25 years, which I actually did with a friend of mine because nobody was doing anything, and I thought, okay, I haven't seen anybody in 25 years because there were some reunions, but I would never go. I never found it interesting to go. But at 25, I had a friend of mine, Caroline, which is a we went to school together, and she was. I looked at her, and she would go to the karaoke bar with me. I said, hey, you know what? It's going to be 25 years next year that we finished high school. Nobody's doing anything. And I looked at her and I said, you know, with Facebook and everything, how about we do it? We do it, and we actually do it at the high school itself. Because nobody had ever done anything back at the high school. So I called the high school, and I said, first I'm going to call the high school to see if it can be done. So I called the high school and said, look, we're at the class of 86. I'd like to do a 25-year reunion at the school. Is it possible? And they said, absolutely. You can rent the cafeteria, and it was like $350 for the whole evening. And they said, you just have to work out the details. So I went back to my friend Caroline and I said, yeah, you know what? $350 for the cafeteria, and it's a go. So we went on Facebook and we went and searched for all the people, and we got hold of a lot of people. And we told them, you know, if you know somebody is not on Facebook, it was, you know, class of 86, let them know this is happening. And you know, my friend Caroline was like, yeah, but it's $350. I said, look, you know what, it doesn't matter, you know, if I have to do it, I'll pay $350. I'll pay it. And that's it. I said, when we're there, we'll ask people if they want to donate something, tell them that it's $350 and we're paying out of our pockets. And you know, so we get to the reunion, and first thing, one of the first guys that comes in, which is a guy that was like the cool guy of the time. And I remember we had a lot of fun, me and him, at the time. It was like, you know, really cool. He looks at me and says, so you're still listening to shortwave radio? And I'm like, you remember that? He says, hey, I'm still impressed 25 years later of what you did in that French class talking about shortwave radio. And I was holding that Radio Moscow letter in my, it's like, you were impressed? He says, we're all impressed. We all remember you for that shortwave thing you did 25 years earlier. And so I said, of course I'm still on shortwave stuff. Absolutely. And it was just so funny. Just so funny. And just to finish off, we put a note out saying, you know, if you want to give something, this costs $350. You know, just saying, because we're not going to ask anybody money, and you know, it was fun to see people, but in seeing all of the people from back then, you obviously not everybody's off with a great life, you know. Some people don't have money and so on. And I remember going to see, so there was a guy watching us. He was paid for watching us. It was a Saturday. And I went to the guy and I said, so I know you're watching us. I know we're not supposed to go into the school. It would be so amazing if you could just give us a tour of the school, have everybody sit down in a class in the auditorium so we can remember our good old days. He looked at me and he said, no problem. We went through the school. We went through auditorium. We went through a class, sitting down. Everybody looking at me and saying, that's Jill. You always sat there in the back, the furthest away you could be from the teacher. I said, hey, I wanted to be like that guy somewhere in the background. And when the night ended, we cleaned up everything. And so it cost $350 for rent. We had the money that was actually given for everybody. We had $500 at the end of the night. So I went up to the guy. Guy said $350 for the rent. Gave him $350. Then I looked at the guy and I said, "Here's $150 because you made us so happy to revisit and go back into nostalgia from visiting the school that I know you were not allowed to do. And we are so thankful." And he looked at us and said, "No, it's too much." I said, "No, it's not." And he looked at us and he said, "You know what? I've been here so many Saturdays with reunions of 20 years, 15 years, 25 years, 30 years. You guys are the best I've ever seen. Polite, cleaning everything. I'm supposed to clean here. You guys cleaned up everything." And I said, "You know what? We are the best class this school has ever had. And tonight we gave you the proof that there will never be a class like us." He looked at me and he said, "You know what? I believe it when I see what you guys have done and how you guys are." And I said, "Look, I'll never be other guys." Fun story. Sorry, guys. I hope I didn't bore you with that school story. Brett Wayne, no, the whooping cough. Rifleman 336, I need to pick the brain of the collective. Who has a good and very high isolation TV splitter? Oh, man. Youch. So, Larry Cordy, 8. Brett Wayne was 12. Bobby Burgess, 29. Dejan was 14. Now he's 17. Been doing it for 3 years. Augustin Bernard, 13. Brent, 14. Mark Rich, 16 years old. Calvin, 13. Ari, 13. Mike, WDX50. My first shortwave listening was with a friend whose dad had a multi-band radio, probably around 12 or 13. Lee Thompson, 1957, he was 9. Hey, Keegan, nice to have you here from Northwest Arkansas. Artist Alley Crafter's Kitchen was 15. iBrawler, 14. Started listening. Keep in mind, I am 15 years old now. Wow. And you were enjoying the hobby, iBrawler? That's what I want to know. Ari became a ham tech when he was 39. So cool. Augustin Bernard was fun, but no digital frequency display. Rifleman 336 started when he was 18 years old, made a concerted effort to get a shortwave receiver. Nobody else cared about them. No. Mickey Dalmage, I heard my first shortwave at 14. I was a medium wave DXer 2 years earlier. First AM QSL WCCO 830 Minneapolis for shortwave QSL Radio Netherlands. Gene Paradis was around 12 years old using a Philco AM FM shortwave. Understand the times. I don't remember my exact age, 13, 14. Used to go to listen to the XAM broadcast band in 9 and 70s. Also did CB around that time. Wow. Mark Cope just got off the lake. Sorry. Was going to do a scan with the PL660, but the fish didn't give me a break. So no shortwave, too many fish in the sea. Frank Ireland, who was 10 years old, was messing around with my dad's Stewart AM FM shortwave radio. Wondered what the SW band was for. So started tuning around. My dad had no idea what this radio had SW or even what it was for. Oh, man. Crazy. This is so crazy. Mike, WDX50. I did my main speech on shortwave radio in oral communications class in college. I didn't like talking in front of people, but I did all right with that speech since I knew the subject so well. The same here. It was the same thing here. Same thing here. Ernie Turner. Should have been a radio DJ. VK3DET. Nice to have you on board, my friend from Australia. Oh, man. Mark Rich, introverts often cannot be stopped when talking about a subject they love. Yeah, because I think it's their way of being able to just go out and talk about a subject. When we are introverts, it doesn't mean we. I think an introvert, honestly, is somebody that would be happy to go out and do whatever, like I'm doing now, but they don't feel right. They don't feel they can do it until you give them a topic that they just can't stop talking about, and then you open a door. Kevin J. Apollo was 12 and 76, lived close to ocean, so was more fascinated by ship-to-shore phone calls. Oh, man, I remember that. Ship-to-shore phone calls. Oh, man. What made me mad about ship-to-shore phone calls was the fact that it's so difficult to get something in English or French or something, a language you understand, because they were international. It was different languages all over the place. But boy, was that fun. That was fun. I had a lot of fun listening to that for sure. Frank Ireland, did anyone ever listen to the Charlie Douglas Road Gang on WWL 870 New Orleans? Or Honest to Goodness on WCCO 830 from the 70s? Rufus Dune, good story. Vince says, I love your stories. You're good at it. Hurry. The phone sex story is the one that wins the number one prize. Andy Cody says 9. Radio German. Wow. Dejan says was actually reported the week who inspired me to get into the hobby. Oh, wow. Cool. I'm Browder. I've really been enjoying the hobby, and I have a feeling I will be continuing for a long time. I think we're all. Vince, first shortwave experience around 10 years old with 1933 Marconi. The radio was bigger than me. Oh, man. Mr. Simba. Wow, you were here awesome. Oh, man. Radio Luxembourg. 6090. Yep. That is famous frequency of that station. John Doe, good afternoon. Just got back from a bike ride. Brought 8 miles for an ice cream cone. Cool. You're so out of shape. I'll scrap that 8-mile bike ride for ice cream. Oh, God. Radio Luxembourg. Rifleman says, short phone calls. Easy for you to say, Joel. Mickey Domich says, you're a great storyteller. You could be Canada's next Stuart McLean. Come on, guys. I'm all red now. Does it show? Bobby Burgess says, me tuning the bands with the icon got him started. Wow. Alan W., nice to have you here. Shell, in the film Ransom with Mel Gibson, the bad guy cop uses an ICOM ICR1 receiver as his two-way radio. They should have done more research. There's so many movies like that. So many movies. It's just like, what? What are you doing? Old radio man used a razor blade radio my dad made when I was about 6. Put my first shortwave kit from Radio Shack together when I was 11. Oh, man. Frank Ireland, Joe, I'm so happy you do these live casts. Great to connect with others who listen to shortwave and reminisce. Great. I one of the first things that I still remember of my teenage years, I got no more alcohol. Do I need to get more? I need you guys to answer that question. I remember, when you're young, and we all have these. I mean, as adults, we have them too. But you're a teenager, and you get out one day, and you're really bored. It's nothing Nothing interesting at home. Nothing interesting. You go outside, nobody's there. Your friends are there. It's like you're alone, and you're like, man, this is boring. What the hell am I gonna do? And I remember it was around my uncles had come over for some party that my dad had made, and of course, what do uncles do? They give you money. So it's like I've got like I don't know $50 in my pocket. So what does a bored teenager do? Well, he goes to Radio Shack with his $50 in his pocket. And I still remember going to the Radio Shack store, and I'm thinking, okay, what am I going to look at? I'm going to look at stuff, And I came across this. There's a sale. There's this kit, 25 experiments, and it's a solar kit, 25 experiments solar kit. And instead of like $30, it's like $14.99. I'm like, that looks fun. That's not expensive. Maybe I'm like 14 years old at the time. And bring it home. And it's funny because my sister was coming over with my my niece. And me and my niece, we would like play to all sorts of, play stuff. And we'd go to the park and we'd have fun all the time. And even my niece today, she comes back, she says, oh man, I remember those times when, I would hide M&Ms everywhere because my sister and my dad would watch horror movies, and I hated horror movies at that time because they would scare me to death, and she hated horror movies because it would scare her to death too. And what I would do is I would hide a big bag of M&Ms, and I would tell her every time there's a big monster on the screen, we grab a batch of M&Ms and we heat them and we look at each other. And she just loved that. And today, still, she tells me, remember when there was movies with monsters? We would grab a bunch of M&Ms and just look at each other. And it's like, yeah, I still remember that. Absolutely. And that day, I had that kit. And I loved that kit. It was so much fun. Only 25 experiments was so cool. And I would do games with her with that kit. So there was one which was a light. There was that CDS, that light resistor thing. So one of them was, when there was light on the light sensor, there's a little red light, a red incandescent bulb that would light up, So what I would do is I would do games. And I remember maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we had, a big family gathering. She says, you know what? I remember one thing that it was so much fun, but that time I went to your place and we would have that red light thing at the end. And it's like, oh yeah, that electronic kit. And she says, yeah. And she said, you had done a game where we had to throw a ball and you had put a flashlight, and it was, the points were, if you send the ball and you block the light so that the light bulb actually shuts down, you'd earn a point. She said, you know what? Today I see how you had so much imagination in creating games and stuff. And I said, you know what? When you came over that time, I was so fascinated with my electronic kit that I wanted to still continue playing with it. So I actually figured out, how can I play with my kid and have fun? And while my niece is here, so we're going to do something together. And I said, I thought of a game. So for me, I was like fascinated because every time I was fascinated by that circuit that would shut down the light. And we were playing a game, throwing a ball, trying to block the light and give it points. And she said, you are so good at imagining things. And I said, look, and it was just so much fun. But I mean, there's so many things like that. I mean, Radio Shack was amazing for that. I think Radio Shack, and probably for a lot of us that are not just, because I think it all goes together. We're radio fans, but we're also electronics geeks. Because radio is cool, but I think electronics for us it's a magical thing. Electronics is a magic box. You look at the circuit board and you're like, wow, that thing does that. You know, you open up the SDR plane and you say that little circuit does that, and lets me listen to signals. Wow, this is so cool. You know, and I think we're all in the same boat here. Is that when you start radio, I think it's a bigger picture for all of us. It's a picture of electronics and having fun with all of what is connected to it, the electronics behind it. Why does a circuit do this, and why do it's just crazy. I still remember Bobby Burgess when you're talking about the ICOM tuning, when I would just turn on the live stream. So when I started here, I was in the kitchen, and I was, of course, like stressed as hell because people are gonna watch me. I was like shaking like this, and what I would do sometimes is, hey, just flicker the switch and just tune around. Just tune, around. That's it. Let's have fun tuning around. And I would tune around. You guys would not see my face. Some of you might remember that. I wasn't in the picture. The camera was on the radio. And I would just tune around and see what signals we hear. And I would read the chat room and see what everybody's talking about. Man, this is crazy. What else do we have? Kim Ahane. Nice to have you here from Yokohama, Japan, Monday morning. Drager 13, breaker. Do you copy? What channel? Roughest dude, grab a drink and decode. Yeah, let's decode something. You guys want me to decode something? Let's do some decoding. We're supposed to do it today, but I haven't done it yet. Jim says, I was 8 years old and listened to an iLight portable multi-band radio. Wow. Mike WDX50, window shopping at Radio Shack back in the day was really fun. Absolutely. I was thinking of all the things I could buy with the money I didn't have. Mark Rich, take care, my friend. Rufus Tune says, I got to put up more clearance tags at Radio Shack and I would scoop the deals. Frank Ireland also misses the old days of Radio Shack. Oh, man. Keegan, XN80X there. My dad, W9GF, was 6 or 7 years old sometime in the mid-late 40s. Zenith table model radio and shortwave bands, family radio. In the late 40s, the family radio was upgraded to a Zenith floor model. His brother, W9JDG, and him got table radio for the room. Wow. So cool. So cool. So I'm Led Zeppelin playing on a 5150 upper sideband right now. WF7I Homebrew Radio Shack was basically Disneyland for some of us. That store was full of amazing wizardry in the 80s. Yep. Absolutely. Rufus News trying to learn FLDG. No sound brewer. I remember so many times being dragged to the mall by older relatives while they shop for clothes. I was in a Radio Shack store. Oh man, I did that so many times. Norman Bloom, do you think shortwave is silenced since the internet? Nope, not at all. The internet isn't what's causing any problems with shortwave, and shortwave is not silence. There's a lot more in shortwave than you think. Mike WDX50, every now and then you can find a good deal on eBay. I bought my Gurnik Satellite 800 for $200. Couldn't believe it. Wow. Take care, D-John. Was a pleasure to have you here. Drager 13, I guess there wasn't much back then on the radio. When? There's a lot of stuff on the radio all the time. There's still a lot on the radio. It's a question of being there and listening to whatever's on, honestly. It's really a question of being there and listening. I think that's the the important thing. So Miguel Almage just sent the QSL. Oh, look at that. That's interesting. From 2019. Oh, so they still QSL, but we're gonna check it out. I am sending a QSL reception report to HCJB. W what? HCJB. Dark Nose and Ale. Nice to have you here from the Netherlands. John Doe. Hey Joe. Why no Google shirt? I know some people have problem with it, but don't listen to them. Oh, I don't. I'm not wearing it because of what people think. Actually, if I just don't listen to what people think. I'm not at all. It's just it goes with my mood of what I want to wear. I thought I'd be nice tonight with a nice little shirt. I want to be beautiful for you guys. That sounds so weird. Duck Go shirt. I want to have one. Duck Go shirt. I want to have a Duck Go in the front and a duck and cover in the back. It was the ancestor to Duck Go was the duck and cover. Frank Ireland, I wish they would backlight the buttons on the portables. The Ethon E5 did it. Yeah, that is something, especially when it's dark. I agree with you. I have a lot of portables. I wish they would have backlight on the buttons. That is totally true. The Grundig G5 I have, when you press a button, you see the lighted keypad. Man, it's so nice when it's dark. That is absolutely a minimum that should be. That's for sure. Robert Glazier, nice to have you here, my friend. Artist Ali Crafter's Kitchen. Okay, let's see here. Jean Paradis remembers Portishead Radio in Britain. Yeah, phone calls on the air. Yep, absolutely. Mike, WDX50, maybe a web crawler shirt. A Yahoo shirt. You got to use Yahoo to search. It was my first email, a Yahoo email. I still use it today. With all my personal information stolen a few years back. Artist Autocrat's Kitchen says there are great deals out on the Grundig 800s, just not on eBay. I got mine on OfferUp. My first one, local thrift shop, paid $150. Wow. I brought her pirate on 6925. 6925. Yes, it is. Not very strong, but I hear 6925. S9 and Northeast Arkansas. Wow. Dark Knight says we had good propagation today. Shell conducted Ireland again today. Let's hope the propagation cycle goes up. Yeah, let's hope. Let's hope. Dark Knight's AOL shirt. I remember when I was a tech guy and they were sending AOL discs, CDs everywhere in the mail. I remember one of my clients coming up to me, showing me the AOL CD, and she says, what's that and what can I do with it? And I said, well, it's advertisement for their internet service, but you already have internet. So what you could do is use it as a high-tech coaster. And I said, I do it. And I actually did it for a while. I would take the AOL discs and put them on my desk here and put my coffee on it. It was my tech coaster. Oh, man. Mike WDX used to subscribe to Yahoo Internet. Oh, God. I forgot about that. Yahoo Internet Life magazine. God. Oh, God. Robert Prosper still can't figure out why it's so hard for me to pick up an AM station 30 miles distant broadcasting with 6 kilowatts. Too much noise. You simply have too much noise. Brett Wayne, Hello Kitty shirt. Oh, God, please. John Doe, does Industry Canada still go after pirate stations? They would probably do, but there's just no, there's like two or three guys across Canada that do it. there's just no one. There's not enough staff to do anything. I mean, it's like the FCC in the U.S. They're trying to do better because they want to kind of go down and try to arrest these FM pirates in the U.S. But in general, forget it. It's like, you know what? There's not enough staff, and shortwave pirates. You know what? They're kind of really tough to really find out. So, nothing's gonna happen here. Roughest News 6925 Belly here. That's pretty much what I have too. I can hear the music, but it's not very strong. Mark Cope 6925 USB going a great job in Dallas. So hey guys, 3 hours and 40 minutes for a Sunday. Isn't that nice? Glenn segment, my first email was Hotmail and Rocket Mail. I do have a Hotmail here. So I want to thank everybody for being great fans. Hope you enjoyed the show today. Special Sunday night show. I think it was fun. We didn't do digital decodings, but let's try to do that on Wednesday. So you guys put me straight to the job Wednesday. Say, hey, digital decodings. And we're going to do it. We need to do a special on digital modes. That's for sure. Hope you enjoyed the show. Hope you enjoyed everything. And you know what? It's funny because the show goes with what you guys are actually talking about also at the same time. So, it goes like this and different things, and we go in different areas. And sometimes we don't necessarily talk about what we should talk, but hey, we're going to keep that for the next show, okay? So thanks, everybody, for being the best fans in the world, because without you guys, I'd be talking to myself. Could be interesting sometimes, but it depends on the amount of alcohol. Take care, everybody. See you guys on Facebook. Absolutely. Don't forget, official SWL channel, the Facebook group where all of this continues. 2 shows a week. We have Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, 0 UTC. Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific, 20 hours UTC. Take care. Love you all. It's fun to have people from around the world watching. It's fun to have all of you always here and sharing together what I think is a passion of ours, which is radio. Okay? So stay safe, everyone. Please stay safe and see you soon. Bye-bye.